20. Well, they need to get closer here. Okay. Let me call to order the City Council meeting of the City of St. Helena for October 11, 2016. This is a regular meeting. Mr. Pitts, would you lead us in the pledge?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Black, roll call.
Mayor Galbraith?
Here.
Vice Mayor White?
Here.
Councilmember Kroll? Here. Pitts?
Present.
Doring?
Here.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address us with respect to matters of municipal concern that are not on our agenda, and any public comment is limited to 3 minutes. Does anybody wish to speak at public comment? Yeah, yes, by all means.
My name is Lois Batuello. I live at 1634 Main Street, St. Helena. And I want to say thank you for your time, Mayor Allen, and members of council. I'm here just to spend a little bit of time to read 4 paragraphs, then the rest is homework, okay? And this is about requirements of government to contact the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. whenever there's a response to a request for proposal where plans are submitted before making a decision on any project that commits the city that involves a foreign national or a foreign corporation. When informed by the public or confirmed by a respondent to a request for proposal, as I now kind of make a request that you check things out carefully. And in doing so, by contacting CFIUS, as we call it, you avoid any violation of the USA Patriot Act, okay? So when you're a small town and you've got somebody coming in to do business for the first time, in a sense, it's a way of letting the government know that this individual is a foreign national, and it sits like 1,000 points of light. It sends a beacon up. And so you can go online with a Google search, and you can type in Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. And this is a function of the United States Treasury. It's all executive branch, and it's a coming together of basically half of our National Security Council. So you have Secretary of Homeland Security has functions there, the Attorney General does, the Director of National Intelligence, of course you've got your treasurer, but any other functions, and then the FBI. So this is what you call the background check, and that is to make sure that only foreign and safe foreign capital is flowing into our communities. The government has no other way when a small private project comes along of knowing that there's foreign influence over there, or there's a foreign something going on. But anyway, I cautioned about foreign ownership in 2004 related to Montalcino Resort after Supervisors Dillon, Dodd, and Luce had resurrected the project. It was shut down the first time because of CFIUS, but it was brought back, and that it had a Chinese developer. That was acknowledged, okay? So you need to find some way to ask questions when you take in applications and proposals. But evidently, the U.S. Attorney in San Francisco obstructed the CFIUS review process as a regional office here. And that was ignored by the supervisors as well, unfortunately. So President Bush flew to St. Helena, and he shut down the project slated for the county's airport-specific zone, the Montalcino Resort project, in April 2006. And that was immediately following meetings in Washington, D.C. with President Hu of China and King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia.
That marks the end of your time, but take another. Oh,
well, it's one more sentence. And then
sure, sure.
A bit later, the president fired the U.S. attorney in San Francisco, and that's per Attorney General Michael Mukasey in testimony in September 2008 before the Senate Judiciary Committee. And the basis was obstruction of justice and obstructing the work of CFIUS. Okay, so you go ahead and take a peek at these and see if you have a process in place where you think planning is a front line, should ask questions. The county does now.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, okay, good. All right, is there further
Thank you.
public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public forum and now proceed to reports by staff and city council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports, and we'll start with the city manager, Ms. Phillips.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just a couple of reminder announcements. We have 2 more workshops for the State of the City and Measure D. One is scheduled for tomorrow at 10 o'clock at the library, and the other is for the 13th at 6 o'clock at City Hall. And again, that's to review the State of the City and Measure D. And then we also announced a proposal workshop to review the proposals for the RFP for the Adams Street and City Hall properties that the city issued. We have 4 proposals that were received. That workshop is now scheduled for Saturday, October 22nd at 10 o'clock. And it's open to the public. It's at the fire station,
Good.
and we hope that you'll join us.
All right, excellent. Ms. Mitz?
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the council for authorizing me and allowing me to go to an amazing training in Chicago the week before last. It was the Government Finance Officers Association. It was a budget training, and it talked about so many different areas, a lot of policies, procedures, best practices. I definitely learned a lot, took a lot home, and I just wanted to take this time to thank you for allowing me to go.
Very good. Ms. Bly? You don't want to talk about the new format for the staff reports?
Well, a little bit of changes you notice on the agenda. I am initiating and implementing the new agenda management program, and so the first part is implementing just the agenda itself and adding page numbers and just additional functionality. And so eventually when I roll out the new web page, there's going to be a lot of more details I get to share later. So.
All right, very good. Mr. Brown? All right. Did I see Ms. Crichton back there somewhere? Okay. Mr. Hausch.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to let the community know that the RFPs have been published in their entirety on the city's website, on the Planning Department webpage, so people can read the entire submittals that the city received in response to the RFPs. And in addition, planning staff anticipates publishing the Hunter EIR for public review and comment in approximately 45 days. So just wanted to let the public know that that will be that is on the horizon and will be coming shortly for public review and comment period, the 45-day review period.
All right. Mr. Palmer?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
All right. Mr. Pitts?
I'll just report on one thing. In our latest LAFCO meeting, it was reported that I think it's due to a little bit of requested additional time at our LAFCO review of our SOI and our Sphere of Influence update study, and Metropolitan Service or Municipal Service Review is going to be delayed a little bit. And so we're probably talking about another 30, 45 days at this point. Everything is backed up, not just us, but Calistoga and Yountville. And part of it, like I said, is because additional information was requested and the cities themselves have asked for more time to review the drafts. And so just want everyone to know that it's moving along, but it's a little bit behind.
All right. Councilmember Kroll?
Yes, so I just wanted everybody to know on October 22nd between 10 and 2, on October 22nd between 10 and 2, there's going to be a unused medication and sharps collection at the St. Helena Police Department, also at the Calistoga and Yountville Police Departments, but it will also include controlled substances. So if you have any of those that you would like to get rid of, please don't flush them down the toilet, because that impacts our waterways, so bring them to this event. Also, there's a hazardous waste collection event at the Calistoga Fairgrounds on November 5th from 9 to 3.
All right. Mr. Doing?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. White?
Yeah, the mayor and I both attended the conference for the League of California Cities, and I know I really enjoyed it and thought it was very beneficial. We're at a number of different sessions that dealt with issues that all the cities in the state of California are dealing with. And some of the things some of the sessions that I attended included, and I think Noah will love this one. What planning directors wish council members knew about planning. Medical marijuana and the continuing regulatory changes. And there was a big discussion about if the proposition passes this November, what challenges the cities will have for coming up with new regulations. Hot topics in municipal revenues, budget finance. This one was really interesting. Land use and CEQA litigation update. That was, I thought that was interesting. And meeting affordable housing challenges with fewer resources, which was really enlightening to me. So had a good time, and I got a lot out of it. So.
Well, the Vice Mayor basically took the words out of my mouth.
I would.
It was 3 full days of sessions with a wide diversity of topics, as you just heard. And I must say, Proposition 64, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, if it passes, is going to certainly present us with some interesting choices, and we're going to need to deal with that one before the close of 2017. There was also a very interesting one with respect to drones and the issues that municipalities are beginning to face with respect to drones. I talked to our local supervisor actually today about that one, and at least my initial urge is that the county take the lead on that one, but it seems like it's an issue that's going to affect all jurisdictions. There was also an exhibit hall with some very interesting exhibits, including a couple that I'm going to share with Mr. Palmer after the session here today. But yes, it was a very good thing for the Vice Mayor and myself to attend. I think we both got a lot out of it. So with that, we'll move on to presentations and public recognitions, and we have a proclamation. All right, so get this near me here. So the proclamation relates to Friends and Foundation. It's National Friends of Libraries Week, October 16th through 22, 2016. Whereas Friends and Foundation, St. Helena Public Library, raise money that enables our library to move from good to great, providing the resources for additional programming, much needed equipment, support for children's summer reading, and special events throughout the year. Whereas the work of the Friends and Foundation St. Helena Public Library highlights on an ongoing basis the fact that our library is the cornerstone of the community, providing opportunities for all to engage in the joy of lifelong learning and connect with thoughts and ideas of others from ages past to the present. Whereas the Friends and Foundation St. Helena Public Library understand the critical importance of well-funded libraries and advocate to ensure that our library gets the resources it needs to provide a wide variety of services to all ages, including access to print and electronic materials, along with expert assistance in research, readers advisory, and children's services. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Alan Galbraith, Mayor of the City of St. Helena, do hereby proclaim October 16th through 22, 2016 as Friends of Library Week in St. Helena, California, and urges everyone to join the Friends and Foundation St. Helena Public Library and thank them for all they do to make our library and community so much better. Dated October 11, 2016. So thank you. Anybody want to talk for just a second? Okay.
I was going to thank the friends.
Okay.
No, thank you.
I give this one.
I just wanted to thank the Friends and Foundation for helping make the library shine. Last fiscal year, we had over 114,000 visits to the library and 500 programs that wouldn't have been possible without their generosity and funding of part-time staff and programming and the library's programming. This ranged from story times in Spanish and English, which instill a love of words and reading with the young, to lectures that satisfy the want for knowledge in all ages. And I would be remiss if I didn't count cultural events and promote ours on October 27th. In honor of Italian Heritage Month, we're going to have the hot frittatas doing romantic Italian cafe music. So, so thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Can I just say one quick
Oh, sure.
So I just want to say we love our library and we're very happy to support it, but we can't do it without the support of our community. So thank you to everyone who donates every year and comes to our fundraiser on January 29th, Bookmark Napa Valley. Thank you.
Very good. All right. So the next item on our agenda, staff briefing, there is none. That takes us to consent items. And I'm going to read off the items on the consent calendar. And as always, any member of the council or any member of the public can ask that the item be pulled, in which case we'll go through the normal process with respect to that item. 8.1, consideration of proposed approval of regular meeting minutes of September 27, 2016. 8.2, consideration of proposed adoption of resolution approving a professional services agreement with Coastland Civil Engineering, Inc. for development, review, and plan check services in an amount not to exceed $141,100 for services through June 30, 2018.
I'd like to have that one pulled.
Likewise.
All right.
Thank you.
8.3, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution authorizing the City of St. Helena Fire Department use a portion of the wastewater treatment facility's property for use as a training facility for a fair market fee of $800 per month, totaling $9,600 per year. Fee is to be transferred annually from the Fire Department budget to the Wastewater Enterprise Revenue Fund, number 5713470, for zeros other revenues. 8.4, consideration proposed approval of a resolution authorizing a budget increase of $1,232 to count number 289-4728-2245 for fiscal year 2016-17 for the after-school enrichment program. The $1,232 represents funds which were not spent in fiscal year 2015-16 for the after-school enrichment program and will increase the fiscal year 16-17 after-school enrichment program budget from $12,000 to $13,232. 8.5, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution approving amendment number 2 to the employment agreement with John Sorensen to reestablish a specified hourly rate of $74.51 for the chief's overhead assignments outside of the City of St. Helena jurisdiction billed to the State of California or the Department of Emergency Services. 8.6, consideration and proposed approval of resolution supporting the League of California Cities Board of Directors decision at its meeting of June 24, 25 that carefully reviewed ballot measures affecting California cities expected to be on the November 26 statewide ballot, opposing Proposition 53 revenue bonds, statewide voter approval, constitutional amendment. B, supporting Proposition 54, California Legislature Transparency Act of 2016. 8.7, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute Amendment Number 1 to the Memorandum of Understanding between the Napa Valley Transportation Authority and the City of St. Helena for fixed route and on-demand shuttle service through the St. Helena Vine Shuttle. 8.8, consideration and proposed resolution of a, consideration and proposed approval of a resolution to approve fiscal year 2015-2016 budget expense increase in the amount of $107,278 to Fund 743 and a budget expense decrease to Fund 741 in the amount of $107,278 for funds received from the Capital Projects for Transportation Development Act, Article 3, grant-funded items for the Mitchell Drive Sidewalk Project. That was a mouthful. Okay. So at this point, the chair would entertain a motion to approve consent items 8.1 through 8.8 with the exception of 8.2.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Black?
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Kroll?
Yes.
Pitts?
Yes.
Doreen?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. So that takes us back to 8.2, and that's you, Mr. Palmer.
Would you like a brief staff report, or do you just want me to answer questions? How would you like to do it?
Why not a brief staff report, and then we'll see what questions
Got it.
council
Okay.
members have.
No problem. So this item tonight is asking the council to approve a professional service agreement with Coastland Civil Engineering. They provide the city with development review and plan check services for the engineering department. So we did an RFP on June 3rd, and it included actually 3 separate areas of engineering. We had development review and staff augmentation, which this agreement is for. We also had a project administration task and a stormwater compliance task, and consultants are able to propose on 1 or 2 or all 3 if they wanted to service lines. Just a few weeks ago, we actually approved 1 contract. So on August 23rd, council approved 1 contract with Larry Walker Associates for the stormwater compliance services. So this is the remaining services we anticipate to need help with for this fiscal year is the development review and staff augmentation. Project administration tasks we probably will not be executing any agreements for. This person right now sits at City Hall 1 day a week and does plan check for us. They generally take work back to their home office too, and it usually is around 10 to 20 hours a week with an average of 15 is how we typically budget it. The cost of their services is generally covered by the application fees and building permit fees. And this fiscal year, we've got $72,000 total budgeted for this task. So we spent some of that already. So we're asking that this contract be for $47,500 from this fiscal year to get us through the remainder of the fiscal year to July 1, and then an additional $93,600 for next fiscal year. I think that's it. With that, I'll answer questions.
All right, Mr. Pitts?
Really what I wanted to raise is just, I had heard from several members of the public, we have we have no money, we have 141,000, we're adding to the budget, how can we be doing that? And it was exactly what you just said, that these costs are generally a pass-through, and they are funded essentially through the fees that we collect for permit applications and design review. And I wanted to make that clear, but the one question I did have, in addition to that, was, does once a week work with respect to keeping the process moving on some of these projects, or do certain things get delayed unnecessarily, where if we had them in the office, say early in the week on a Monday or a Tuesday and late in the week on a Thursday or Friday, could we be more efficient in terms of how we're processing things, and is there an advantage there from what you're seeing?
Well, so what I can say is that I actually, on the same page with you, have been trying to get someone here more often. It's a challenge, frankly, just with workload and trying to find the right consultant. Everyone, we got, I think there were 5 proposals, and we had 3 that I interviewed, and none of them could commit to 2 days a week. It's just really hard to get that kind of commitment out of folks. So we're making it work this way. Fortunately, now what I've been doing is staff here is really involved in the plan check and development review process, even though we have a junior type level person doing the grunt work and the day-to-day grinding through stuff. The decision making, a lot of the public interaction is done by staff. So that's myself, and now with the new assistant director coming on, Erica, it'll be her role to be that person. So it's really incumbent upon staff, even though this person is doing a lot of the grunt work, it's incumbent upon the staff to be familiar enough with the project to be able to field those calls as they come up and attend meetings and be available and understand the project. I think with any kind of service level delivery method, you're still going to see there's a little bit of time, because there's a lot of work to get through, and you can't always get through it in a week. Sometimes it takes a couple weeks to get through all the work.
Okay, so even if we wanted to have them there more often, none of the proposals would really allow for it, because they're managing 5 cities, and they're being outsourced, so they're giving 1 day to each city. And with the outsource model, that's part of what we have to deal with. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right. And I continually work with Coastland to try and find someone else, and actually with the other providers that we're looking at as well. And I'm hopeful we can work something out. At this point, it would involve bringing on kind of another junior level person from their firm to help, and it's just not. I don't think it provides us with the service level St. Helena deserves to do that. I think I'd rather have the one guy who really knows the stuff here 1 day a week and have staff kind of fill the gap than have someone brand new and have to kind of train them for them.
Well, and if we're available to be that public interface and are up to speed on what Coastland's review is and can address the questions and address the concerns and keep the process moving, then maybe that's the right solution for now.
Okay.
Although I guess I just wish it hadn't been given in the RFP as an out. Because in the RFP, we said the remainder of the work may be performed off-site. So, I mean, that's just the only thing that I would say next time we do something like that. Let's just see what happens because I'm a believer in being there, and I think the public likes that as well.
Yeah, Steve and I have talked earlier, so I have most of my questions answered. I think this is for the public's benefit, and this is a good discussion. Can you just explain just a little bit more in terms of, I guess the fundamental question is why we use Coastline Engineering and not our own staff? What's the basis for that?
Right. Well, the primary benefit that I see and to the city of using this type of model is that we can be very targeted with the hours that we spend and the amount and the cost. So the Coastline engineer that's here, when he's here, he's only working on projects, and so there's no downtime, there's no overhead costs. I don't pay for him to sit around. If there's nothing for him to do, he goes home, or I call him and say, "Don't come in this week." So there's that level of control over billable hours, and he's not. The city's not paying for him if he's not busy, and then also gives us flexibility for workload. That if applications go up, we get to shift more work to them. And if applications go down, the city doesn't have to lay anybody off. We don't have to deal with that workload fluctuation. It's all up to the consultant to deal with that and handle their staffing accordingly.
All right. Is
another way to put that it really helps with overflow when workload is very heavy without having to hire another person that would be far more expensive.
That's true.
Okay. All right. Is there any public comment with respect to this? All right. Yes, Ms. Manette.
I wasn't going to say anything, but since it was pulled, I'm just curious. I just want some clarification. I'm just wondering. I can see, it's been funded for the rest of this year already. I'm just curious. How can we fund it for next year when we really don't know what we're going to be looking at next year? There might be emergencies. There might be other places where this funding needs to go. How come we're not just approving it for the rest of this fiscal year? We have the money, rather than commit ourselves to money next year that we really don't know, where we want to put it, because we can't, anticipate emergencies and that sort of thing. So I was just curious about that. And I was also wondering, is it possible to put out a new RFP for this that does specify that we would like the people to be able to stay here? Because I really agree with what Council members Kroll and Pitts said about having someone here to meet the needs of the public and applicants, when they need to speak with someone. So, those are my questions.
You. Would you like to respond briefly?
Yes, I can respond briefly. So, to the issue of the value of the contract and how we deal with the fact that some of this rolls over to next year's, we're executing a contract that has a not to exceed amount and a term limit, and it's billed time materials and by the hour. And so for next year, we'll do this is getting into the nuts and bolts of how city government works, but we'll do a purchase order for the remainder of this year, the $47,500, and then so that'll get us through to June 30th, and when that money's gone, we can't spend anymore. We'll issue a new purchase order for the balance of the contract. So if we go through the budget process, the normal budget process every year, and we decide that $93,800, whatever I'm estimating right now, is too much or not enough, we'll adjust it during the budget process and then issue the PO for next year based on that budgeted amount. So right now we're just sending a maximum agreement amount. We're estimating what we're going to need for next year, and it just helps streamline the process so I don't have to do an RFP every year.
But we're not committed to spending that amount. This is a not to exceed.
That's right.
It's a not to exceed, but keep in mind that the revenue is coming from the developers. When a developer or any person coming with a project that needs a review in the engineering department, we can't say no. It's not a choice. When we talk about choices and things that are discretionary, project review is not a choice. And so we have to provide this service, and the person, the client or the customer or the developer who's doing this project pays the vast majority of the cost of having that person review the plans, whether it's our staff or a contract staff. So if the economy goes bust and there's no projects, there's no revenue, there's no work. And so the work stops. If the economy goes crazy and there's more work than we can handle, we'll probably come back to you and ask for an increase to this, because there's going to be more projects, more revenue coming in, which means there's more work.
Again, it's essentially a pass-through.
Yeah.
All right. Any further council discussion? Is there a motion to approve 8.2?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Black?
Councilmember Pitts?
Yes.
Doreen?
Yes.
Kroll?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Okay, that takes us to public hearings. And the first is item 9.1, appeal of the Planning Commission decision to deny a short-term rental permit renewal to Steve and Brenda Podesta of 1243 Stockton Street. Mr. Hausch is...
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Item 9.1 is an appeal of the Planning Commission denial of short-term rental permit renewal requested by Steve and Brenda Podesta to operate a short-term rental at 1243 Stockton Street. The Podesta's short-term rental permit was first approved on July 31st of 2012 and was renewed one time in 2014. The application renewal for the next application was filed 30 days prior to the expiration date. Was originally scheduled for review in August. However, the applicants requested a continuance, and so the public hearing was heard on September 6th by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission made the decision to deny the short-term rental renewal application after hearing multiple public comments, listen to the applicant make a presentation, and holding a significant discussion. And as a result of those elements of their review, the Planning Commission determined that the operation of a short-term rental at this location was detrimental to the Stockton Street neighborhood. They based this determination on the narrow street of Stockton, the narrow width of Stockton, limited parking, the smaller lots in the area, and the reduced setbacks for some of the historic development pattern. The Planning Commission further found that short-term rental operations at this site was injurious to the public health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood due to the unique historic character of Stockton Street, limited parking on one side of the street, increased traffic and noise associated with the short-term rental operations, and the overall density of short-term rentals in this area of the city. Planning Commission also found that short-term rental operations here had created adverse impacts to the neighborhood, resulting in a loss of character. As identified in the staff report, there was a reference to several calls to the police department, 6 calls in total. However, 3 of those were not related to short-term rental operations. Since the Planning Commission reviewed this application and denied it, several additional calls to the neighborhood have been made. However, only 1 was a result of short-term rental operations. That's referenced in the staff report. And it's worth noting that in one of those complaints to the city that were identified in the staff report, planning staff actually responded to the site. There was a concern over short-term rental patrons parking on the street. Planning staff went to the site. The parking lot, the driveway was empty, and no one answered to a knock on the door. So there's no way to confirm whether the cars that were filling up the street at that time were associated with short-term rentals or not. The applicant filed an appeal of this decision, which is why we're here tonight. And essentially, they felt that the decision made by the Planning Commission was not based on the municipal code requirements for short-term rentals. Regarding the fiscal impact, upholding the Planning Commission's decision would result in a short-term decline in TOT paid, as there would be a gap in one of the short-term rental operations that's occurring in the city. And staff is recommending that the City Council consider the appeal, staff report, and testimony and either grant or deny the applicant's appeal of the Planning Commission's decision to deny their request for a short-term rental permit. I'm available for any questions. The applicant is here to make a presentation as well, and I believe there's members of the public that would also like to speak.
Let me ask one preliminary question of our council. It says in our rules that with respect to a land use matter, the applicant in this case has 15 minutes. Is this considered a land use matter?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So under the rules, the applicant would have 15 minutes, and then members of the public would have 3 minutes. If there's an organized answer, it would be 5 minutes, meaning that someone holds the proxy for a number of people making the same point. So with that, unless there are any preliminary questions of staff, I would proceed to hear from the applicant or the appellant.
Members of the council, my name is Steve Podesta. I own a home at 1243 Stockton Street. I have already responded in detail to the Planning Committee's resolution in my letter dated September 13th of this year. I believe I have disproved all the committee's findings. And seek your authority to approve my short-term rental permit. I am prepared to answer any questions the council may have on the following issues that were outlined by the Planning Commission's denial of my permit. With respect to limited parking, we can park 8 cars in our driveway, but when we only rent to people that are out of state, and generally when they come in, they're renting 1 car. Usually, we target 3 couples for our house. It's best use, and so they generally rent 1 car, and it's in the driveway. Many of these of our guests use drivers all day and limo services and whatnot. So there is no parking issue on the streets because my people sign a contract not to park on the street and only to use our driveway. Okay, so with regard to increased traffic, there isn't any increased traffic. I mean, my wife and I, when we're there, we both have cars and go to and from. When these people are coming to St. Helena, they're here. They stimulate our economy. They're generally, we're walking distance to Main Street, and people like our house and continue to come back because of the proximity to Main Street and being able to walk. A lot of people come to St. Helena, to the valley, and wine is a big thing. People don't want to drink and drive, so my house has been fairly popular, but we don't rent it that often. So increased traffic, there's no reliable evidence that suggests my guests increased traffic on Stockton Street. They park their cars for the duration, usually the duration of the stay, stays in the driveway. They ride bikes, they walk. Most of the traffic is commercial vehicles. There is no increased traffic that we consider this a fallacy. There just isn't. Let's see. Noise. The people that come to my house don't make any greater noise than my wife and I do, and both of my kids are there. So there's no real increased noise from the short-term rental people. They usually spend all day out, so they're wine tasting and out and doing and restaurants and whatnot. So by the time they get back, they're usually tired and ready for bed. Complaints, by now you must know the overwhelming majority of so-called complaints have come from just 2 people, 2 of my neighbors. We love our neighbors, and I have great relationships with all of them, with the exception of these 2. These 2 people, Amir Kashani and Joni McQuitty. As the council knows, Mr. Kashani is under court order not to harass me or my family or my guest. I would refer to the police department and Napa County Superior Court for the truth. Okay, and Noah Pausch is very familiar with this and has all the writing from the Napa Court. Character of the neighborhood. Everything my wife and I do benefits the character of my neighborhood. We improve and maintain our home for that very, very purpose. When we are motivated to maintain our homes in pristine condition, it only helps the neighborhood. Everybody wins. To argue otherwise is false, and there is no evidence to suggest otherwise. Further, I love this city, And, you know, the city's got some issues, some financial issues. And we're one of 21 people that pay a TOT tax. And when we bring people in, they spend money here. There are 200, and I discussed this with Noah as well. I said, well, you know, I have competition. I've got 200 other people that are renting illegally, renting their homes illegally here that are advertising on VRBO. And I asked Noah, I said, what are you doing to stop those people? And he said, well, you remember what you said? We can't afford to. We don't have the staff to be able to police them. So here I'm doing everything right and being punished for it. It just doesn't seem right to me. I think if we don't start changing things here with respect to revenue for our city, we're going to become irrelevant. So I hope that doesn't happen here. And I hope that you really consider my application very seriously. Thank you very much. My son, Jake, will be speaking next.
All right.
Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Jake Podesta, son of Steve Podesta. I'm up here today to talk to you a little bit about, actually didn't want to have to get into any of this. And it's kind of, at this point, it's forced. Amir Kushani, who's here today, actually filed a false report with St. Helena Police Department saying that I tried to run him over in my car in the Safeway parking lot. This is in April. And the report states that there is no video in the parking lot, and that he just filed the report. So when I heard this, and I actually had a police officer show up to my place of business, which was a little bit frightening, considering it could have, gotten me fired from my job, considering I was driving a company car. So when I found this out, I knew where I was parked at the Safeway. I was directly next to the front door. So I went to Safeway and I talked to the manager there. I asked them to review the tape of the front door. Clearly, my truck is in view, and it shows Mr. Kashani very far away from my car, and it is a complete false statement. The police department has that video of me pulling out of the driveway and Mr. Kashani walking in, or actually standing in the middle of the street for some reason for a long period of time. It shows him clearly, shows me driving away, and then later him walking into the store. When he filed the report, I could have gone to court. I really, like I said, I didn't want to get into this, but however, it has almost been forced on me, considering he's put my family into the second round of court, or whatever this is. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So pretty much I'm here just to discredit him and as being a liar.
Well, let's try to adhere to reasonable standards of courtesy here. You've made your point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Noah has also seen the video talking.
All right.
Please go to the podium.
No, he's already spoken. So the question is, next, is there any other person that wishes to speak in favor of the appeal?
Yes.
Sure. Please come forward.
Will he be able to speak after?
Well, we can hear the opponents, and then sure, I'll take a few rebuttal comments afterwards.
Okay, so he will be able to speak.
Sure. Does anybody wish to speak in opposition to the appeal? Please come forward. Yeah.
My name is Mary Kashani, and we live at 1230 Stockton Street, across from Mr. Podesta and Brenda. I just want to say that when the license was revoked, the Podestas haven't been around. I would say since the commissioners revoked the license, they've been there about, I'm saying, maybe 3 days. But they've continually rented the house. And I just want to say, I have a high-stress job. I discharge psychotic patients from LOCC facilities, psychiatric patients. And so when I get home at night, I like to relax. And so I had a 3-day weekend, and the Podestas had 8, I don't know if they were single women, but they were women since Thursday. And it was a party weekend this weekend. And as Mr. Podesta cannot attest to this because he wasn't there. And our neighbor next door, who was from North Carolina, he came and he said to us, he said, now I understand what you're talking about, because he got to experience it himself. And I just want to say that my grandsons were there, and we had like a slumber party in our room. And they were screaming and yelling. And Mr. Podesta does advise them to keep the living room doors shut, but they decided to come in and out. So there was screaming, and we've given up on calling the police because Amir's gone down to City Hall, and calling the police like I said, we've given up. He's gone to City Hall probably 30 times and complained. I don't know where those are not noted in the complaints that have been made. So that's not factual when you say only six complaints have been made.
Please address the council.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to say that Mr. Podesta talks about a restraining order. We also have a restraining order against him. It works both ways. We're comments and everything else. And it's been pretty peaceful since we're both staying away from each other. But I moved to St. Helena to live in a community, to raise my kids. I love the life here, the small town. I didn't move here to live across the street from a hotel where limousines are driving up, or the small buses, or even when the big huge bus drove up at 2 o'clock in the morning and they put their pressure thing down where the bus comes down and all the people are coming out drunk. I understand that people want to make money, but not at the neighbor's expense.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak in opposition to the appeal? Yeah, yes, please.
Good evening. Tona Kovakovic, 1565 Pine Street. I'm the neighbor up the street. I fought a short-term rental next door to me last year, and we were successful for all of the reasons stated with the Planning Commission. I think the Planning Commission, all personalities and neighbors and everything put aside, I think the Planning Commission, with their unanimous vote against this applicant and this application, I think they've done your homework for you, and I think that they have proven that it doesn't follow the statutes of the city. This location is not appropriate for short-term rental, and I think the neighbors coming forward here tonight are very bold. I know it's not an easy thing to do. I live further up the street. I'm not comfortable here. This has nothing to do with the Podesta family. This has to do with a boutique hotel being run in a residential neighborhood. And if St. Helena's powers that be are not going to protect our neighborhoods, I think we have a far bigger issue than our budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other persons wish to speak in opposition to the appeal?
Marianne Brooks, 1750 Main Street. I agree the same that the Planning Commission had a unanimous vote against this short-term rental. Again, I have nothing against the Podestas. I too live next to one, so I firsthand know exactly what the neighbors are going through. What happens is you're pitting neighbor against neighbor. We have the ordinance, but we do not have enforcement of the ordinance. We as neighbors have been put in place to enforce it, and it's really sad because it is changing our neighborhood. And the things that in the ordinance that we talk about is, it says here that the permits, no permit shall be approved in the operation of a short-term rental if it has caused adverse impacts on the neighborhood, which it has, in which it is situated or otherwise caused the loss of the character of the neighborhood. And that's obvious that it has. And I solely agree that it should be denied. And as they stated tonight, or as Noah stated tonight, since the commission meeting, there's also been another call to the police department. So unfortunately, that ends up being the only resource we have with our neighbors. And like I say, it's in some areas it's applicable, but in this it is not. It's a very narrow street. I drive down it every day, and there are cars in and out. It doesn't matter if the tenant is using the driveway. What you have is maids, gardeners, limos, Uber, buses, constant. And that's exactly what I experience at mine as well. So I am requesting that you accept the commission's denial of it.
All right.
Thank you.
Any further comment in opposition to the appeal?
Am I speaking correctly? Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
My name is Joni McQuitty. I live right next door to the Podestas. I have owned my small cottage since 2000. I did not intend to speak at the Planning Commission hearing, but I ended up doing so. And I do have a question for all of you. Have you received and read the letter that I wrote recently? It did get to all of you. In it, I added to what I had written before, which essentially boiled down to, this is a beautiful, well-run, fantastic, small boutique hotel. It is simply the wrong business in the wrong place. It impacts the neighborhood in many, many ways, all of which have been brought up already by other people. As you can see, I'm a little old lady. I sit very, very close, minimum side distances, a side door which people go in and out constantly because it is off the family room. It's half a floor up and it looks down on me. I added on to my little cottage sometime before the Podestas moved in. There were other people there, and it worked out to be very, very lovely back then because there was not a door there. There was a window. But a developer put a door in. So that brought everything that happens in that house, not to mention the backyard, very, very close to me. So I don't know what else to say beyond what has already been said to the Planning Commission. I wasn't going to speak tonight either, except that Mr. Podesta chose to mention my name. I have tried very, very hard to keep everything connected with this whole situation, not on a personal level. But he kind of brought it that way. Since the Planning Commission meeting, there have been a constant stream of people, strangers. They look down on me. Sometimes they speak to me when I'm there. It's very much in my face. I have dealt with it for 10 years since they arrived.
Okay, thank you. If you have another sentence or two, that's fine. Otherwise, please
Okay.
complete your remarks.
The thing that I just learned about was the American Disabilities Act. And I question whether that applies to this particular house, because I'm not aware in any way, shape, or form of any access to the house for any people with disabilities. I recognize that Mr. Podesta may very well make absolutely sure that he doesn't rent to anybody like that, but I think it is a question that should be looked at. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, does anybody else wish to speak in opposition to the appeal? Yes, please. All right.
Hi, my name is Amir Kashani. I live on 1230 Stockton Street, St. Helena. I've been living there for the last 25 years. What I'm going to let you know, because I have such a short time, is basically I'm a structural engineer, civil engineer. So I do some of the surveys for some companies for any kind of commercial or residential. I did a little survey on his house, Mr. Podesto. The street is 30 feet wide. It was designed for little buggy stuff 100 years ago or whatever. And so it's not designed for cars. So what they did, they put a car one side parking spot. And the two cars, when they want to pass by there, they usually have a hard time to pass each other. So for the house, actually I remodeled it myself 20 years ago. So it's interesting. That house is a beautiful house. They have a beautiful, you walk in, it's a beautiful house. People walk in. I see that, I'll just let you know, their guests walk in. The first thing they do, they go get their wine, open up the living room porch, which is in front of the house, and get the wine, start from the time they move in there, having a party. And starts from 5 in the afternoon, it goes all the way up to 10, 10:30, because he let them know that you can't do that because they were used to do that, now they're not doing it anymore. Make the story short, the house is not designed for commercial. The house is designed for, the house is not designed for commercial. It's designed for residential. So what is happening in there, you have not adequate electrical work. You don't have adequate of a sprinkler system. The fireplace is stove fireplace. So you can't use that really. You're not supposed to. In any hotel you go to, they don't let you use the wood fireplace. They are all gas. And the sprinkler system, there's no sprinkler system. There's no handicap ramp. And there is no adequate sheetrocking. The sheetrocking is designed just for houses, not for commercial. So if there is a fire, which one of the guests, let's say they're having a good time, something happened, accident happened, next door to them is 10 feet. 10 feet, not more than that. Houses are too close. If there is a fire happen, she gets on fire, he gets on fire, I get on fire. So basically, the house is not adequate to be a hotel or motel or whatever. Residential, that's one thing. But so, and the house has a nice personality. People go in the backyard, they have jacuzzi, we can hear them. They're soundproof, the sound come all the way through. So here it is. I have some picture for you that it shows all the neighbors. I mean, all the parking spot that they're telling that there is nobody's parking there. I got them. I marked them up. Sorry about my handwriting, but if you like to take a look at them, there's about 17 pages. I'm going to give it to Mr. Noah.
Why don't you give it to the city clerk?
Okay.
And she can put it in the file.
You got it.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, very good.
I hope that you revoke the license.
Now,
Thank you.
does anybody else wish to speak in opposition to the appeal? Yes.
Yes. Well, not in opposition to the appeal. Yes. Is that in opposition or am I for the appeal? No, I'm in opposition. I'm Anna Canales. I'm sorry, I was taking care of my 88-year-old mother, so I just literally flew out of there to get here. what I'd like to say is that we have neighborhood issues on Stockton Street. I don't think those issues have anything to do with short-term rental. They have to do with who my neighbors are. I've lived there 1 month less than Mr. Kashani. I've lived there since 1994. I watched Mr. Kashani remodel the house that he's saying is no longer up to code. I agree with Mr. Kashani in that I don't think there should be short-term rentals in neighborhoods. But that's not the law right now in St. Helena. So I think as these hotels come online and we're collecting tot tax, all short-term rentals should be taken off the market in St. Helena, across the board. But right now, that's not our law. Our law right now is there are these permits. I live 60 feet. Mrs. McQuitty's house, her lot is 47 feet. I live on the other side of it. I have the 2 stories that actually hears everything that goes on, and it's not been a problem for me at all. When they first started, it was a problem. We took care of it 5 years ago. And it hasn't been a problem in the neighborhood since then. It's true that Stockton Street is a narrow street. There's 6 off-street parking places in the wonderful driveway that Mr. Kashani put there. So the 6 cars that are there that are short-term rentals, if there are ever 6 cars, which I've never seen that many, are off-street. If you look at the cars that are on the street, there's my husband's truck, there are 3 of the Kashani cars, there's Dr. Gold's truck, and sometimes Tom Trainer's truck. Very rarely, very, very rarely, have I ever seen a car that I didn't know. So I just would like you to stop and think about what you're doing as a council. Are you taking all short-term rentals off? Because if you are, I agree with that. But if you're choosing this one because of a neighborhood issue, that issue isn't going to go away with the short-term rental. So I think you have to be careful about what it is that you're doing here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any further comment? Does anybody wish to provide any further rebuttal comment? All right.
Hi, my name is John Morgan, and I speak to you as a former guest of the Podestas and a friend, and nothing more. First and foremost, I'm no lawyer, but I certainly know that Mr. Kashani, I guess, certainly cannot be considered an expert in permits and fires and all that kind of stuff, so that seemed a little odd to me. And I only bring that up because I've stayed at the place, and I can attest to you that it's immaculate, both outside and inside. And the times that I've stayed there, parking has never been an issue, noise has never been an issue, and there's never been any kind of character flaw brought about by either myself or any of his guests. Personally, and I feel obligated to tell the council this, I've seen Mr. Kashani do certain things with my own eyes, only out of serendipity. I mean, for instance, today he has a truck parked in front of his house. It's filled with garbage, and it takes up exactly the middle of a legal parking spot. I had no idea of this. I wasn't aware of this. I was just coming up because I was asked to speak a little bit on behalf of the Podestas. But at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 3:30, he walked out of his house. He started up the truck. He moved it a yard forward, got out of the car, and went back into his house. And this truck is disgusting. And apparently it's been parked there forever. So I think it's disingenuous to speak poorly about the Podestas and make comments about the character of the neighborhood when he himself is maintaining in my opinion, a public nuisance. In short, I think a lot of the comments that were made here don't really comport with my personal experience. I think the people that have spoken are either A, they don't live near the house, or what they're saying is not really based on anything they've seen or heard. I mean, it's just opinion. And I would agree with the lady that just spoke. Either you revoke the law and say no one gets them, or you follow the law. And if those that are following the law have complied with all the conditions that you've asked them to do, then there should be a fair and reasonable, use of their money that they paid for to renew the permit. And so I would definitely consider the economics of it, but based on my personal experience, I would finish with the old saying, these are not the droids you're after. They are complying with the law, and I think you should definitely support and grant their permit.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor Galbraith, I'm not able to speak because of the restraining order, and I wanted John to talk about a police report that was filed, another false report.
Well, he's had his 3 minutes, so please sit down.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Now, is there anybody else who wishes to speak, or I'll close the public hearing with respect to the appeal? No, you've already spoken. We only allow a person to speak once. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's all right. All right, I'll close the hearing and begin to invite council comment. And does anybody wish to lead off? Mr. White?
I have a question or two, actually.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good.
As when I previously looked at this incident report, it wasn't, the text says what it says, but the table, I'm not sure I fully understand the information. I want to be clear on the information and how this came to be before the Planning Commission and before us. So there was a neighbor, it says there were 6 calls. Of these calls, I'm sorry, this is on page 113 of 242 in our packet. Of the 6 calls, 3 were neighbor complaints about the short-term rental. However, short-term renters were only involved in one of the calls regarding on-street parking and noise problems. So is this to say that of these 6 calls, only one actually related to an incident with an actual short-term rental activity?
So this information is as received by the police department or from the police department. That is the information received does identify that short-term rentals were not or short-term renters were not involved in 2 of them.
And the reason I asked that question, I believe what our code says, and whatever, it's here, we're listening to it, we have to, but I think what our code says that there need to be 3 reported, or some number of minimum reported incidents regarding a short-term rental activity for something to be brought to the Planning Commission. I mean, we can look at any of these permits for any issue, but that's sort of the guidelines, right? If there's problems with the renters and they're not being policed by the owner of the property such that they keep occurring, then it comes to the Planning Commission for review versus being an administrative review. Is that accurate, or am I off there?
I don't have the text in front of me. I'm happy to look. It does give discretion, but 3 calls is also referenced.
Right, okay. And I know there is discretion, and obviously there's some issue going on here. I'm just trying to cut through the weeds and figure out what the issue really is. Okay.
I have a couple questions similar to yours. And so the Podestas got their permit in 2012. The first report we have of calls to the police is 2015. Was there no action for 3 years?
I believe that we only asked for the most recent information regarding short-term rentals, so it's basically based on the previous permitted period. I don't believe we went back that far.
Okay, and this the incident on April 1st, complaint of renters parking on street. Was this the incident where you went out there and nobody answered, so you don't actually know whether these cars were or were not?
That's
short-term
correct. So,
rentals?
so there was two issues. One with noise, which the city, the police department had addressed. I think the renters were being loud, and the police department asked them to be quiet. And then they came by and informed me of the issue, and I went by, and no one answered the door, and there were no cars in the parking lot or in the driveway, but the street parking was full.
Okay, so there has been, I guess it's a little bit unclear also with the more recent ones, there has been interaction between the police and actual renters?
Yes.
Once, or how many times?
Based on this information, I can only confirm two. The three, or the one that was identified in the Planning Commission summary, and then the one that was a result since the Planning Commission denial.
Which was this September 12th? Or that's the visit to the police. I'm just wondering, it's unclear to me in these September calls whether there was actually, one says call to police, visit to police. So did the police go out there?
That was a visit to the police, and I can't confirm if the police department went to that site on that day or not.
Okay, so we only really know of one time the police interacted with the renters, not with the Podestas, not with the neighbors.
Based on the information, that's correct.
Well, on those three that are in September, do they even relate to short-term renters, or they're just disputes?
One of them was a concern of a neighboring resident that came to the police department to let them know. And I believe this information, it was stated that there's been a number of complaints beyond just what is identified. That's because these are only verified issues that the police department has actually verified. Some activity was occurring on the property which required them to respond to, not just a complaint that they maybe went by and they didn't notice any noise. So this is a confirmed issue.
They went out there.
They went out there and confirmed that something was occurring.
And on the April 1st, 2016, with the ongoing noise problems, those were after 10 p.m.?
I don't have that information.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the April 1st, 2016?
Correct.
I believe no. I believe it was during the day because I responded at, I think it was 6 o'clock on a Friday afternoon regarding the parking, and the police department had, I believe, already gone out to deal with the noise.
For the noise. And was that amplified noise? Because we restrict amplified noise, right, from a short-term rental.
I don't have that information.
Otherwise, I think the noise restrictions are between the hours of 10 p.m. and 9 a.m., right?
So I'm not sure if it was a radio and voices or just voices. I'm not sure.
Okay. Again, I'm just trying to get to the facts here so we can have a better understanding of what we're dealing with respect to this permit.
So I'm happy to respond to a number of the statements that were made through the public. So I do have a copy of the mutual mediated agreement. So it does involve both parties, Mr. Kashani and Mr. Podesta, and they've agreed to certain terms that essentially they won't interact with each other. That's there. I also have confirmed with the police department regarding the incident in the Safeway parking lot. I did not review the tape that was stated, but I did confirm with the police department they received a complaint. They reviewed the evidence, and there was no motivation or justification for them to get involved in that situation.
Not to mention that it doesn't relate to any short-term renters.
That's exactly right. And then getting back to the issue of the number of complaints. So these are actual issues that required a police response, not just a complaint where the police went by and there was nothing apparent going on. So the 6 plus the 3 are actually confirmed issues, although only 2 of them are directly associated with short-term rental activities.
I just wanted to announce that I went to the site and I also reviewed the Planning Commission tape. I didn't go onto your property, but I went around your property. There was a neighbor there standing there, and I chatted with her. I think that was Joni. Anyway, so I have seen the site. Just a point of clarification, and maybe the city attorney can help out here. I'm trying to get a handle on what the authority and obligation of the city council is at this moment. And what I'm having trouble with, and I don't know the answer to, is whether we can sort of go back to sort of the very beginning, irrespective of all the complaints, to evaluate whether this particular use is appropriate for this neighborhood. I don't know if our code allows that or not. It's relevant to the way I'm thinking through the process. So when it comes to you, it's a renewal of a permit. So the reason I'm asking that is I'm wondering, is the applicant in some position to argue, look, I've already been approved in terms of neighborhood compatibility, those kinds of issues, those findings. I got my permit and I got it actually renewed, so that issue has already been resolved. And I don't know if my thinking is correct there or that I need to be educated on that. I think it's an important issue.
So from the staff perspective, and the city attorney can chime in, this is essentially a de novo. Every time you apply, we are looking at how you are proposing to operate for the next 2 years based on the evidence we have from the previous 2 years. City attorney, please can chime in. But in addition to that, the fact that we have revised the ordinance since the previous approval, I think clearly establishes this as a de novo review of this application.
And to further that point, I think some people have made some comments about the short-term rental ordinance, and it has been substantially changed. And I heard some comments out there. I agree with actually some of it, but it seemed to be inconsistent with the way it's written now in terms of it's not so much, oh, well, there's 21 permits and they're approved and that's it, that we also have an obligation, and I think we've grappled with this to a certain extent. We, as a council, can decide where is the best use, where are appropriate uses, out in the country, away from neighborhoods, or we can look at whether there's a host on site all the time. Those kinds of issues are relevant to us, I think, at the beginning, and I would think now.
That's completely accurate.
Thanks.
So the answer is consistent with what Mr. Hausch explained. The appeal before you tonight brings the entire issue to you on a de novo basis. That means you're entitled to consider the entire matter anew. In addition, the ordinance itself speaks in terms of requires you to make 4 findings or to address 4 findings. Those findings are drafted in a way, particularly the finding relating to neighborhood compatibility, that would confer upon the council the discretion on a case-by-case basis to consider what has happened in the years since the permit was last renewed or first issued. In other words, you do have these issues properly before you, irrespective of the fact that a prior council may have granted a permit here. You also are able to exercise that discretion, irrespective of the fact that you do have a short-term rental ordinance that allows for the issuance of permits citywide. That doesn't strip you of your discretion to decide with respect to any specific site or neighborhood that it might not be appropriate based on the findings set forth in the ordinance. So I don't know if that's helpful, but the short answer is that you do have discretion to consider this evening based on the testimony that you've heard and also on the testimony that was presented to the Planning Commission below.
So a follow-up question on that. If this were a new application, and I just don't remember the exact specifics, but there's a number of residents within a certain radius that have to raise their hand and say, we don't want this. Isn't that correct?
Not under the revised ordinance.
Under the revised ordinance, what's the threshold?
Well, the threshold for pure revocation, I believe, is 3 police-involved complaints, right. And then there's discretion granted to the director based on the number of concerns voiced to them, or basically the discretion is given to the director to elevate the decision.
No, I'm saying if it's a new one, our new standard is every new application, because we already have 21 out, actually go through review. Is that right?
Every new application goes before the Planning Commission.
Before the Planning Commission. Okay, all right.
But I think getting to the question you were asking is, may the council consider factors that would have been considered for an initial permit? And the answer to that is yes. That when you're looking at this subjective question of neighborhood compatibility, you can determine, for example, that the number of complaints or the number of neighbor concerns expressed don't rise to a level that make you have concerns as to neighborhood compatibility. So The standards that exist in the ordinance that would be applicable broadly for all of the short-term rental permits, and specifically for the initial consideration by the Planning Commission or the Planning Department, are factors that you can still consider with respect to this renewal before you this evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Does anybody want to start the council discussion? Well, maybe I'll start it. And that is, I want to focus on the first finding that is presented to us if the appeal is denied. The establishment of a short-term rental at the project site is not compatible with and will be detrimental to the character of the Stockton Street neighborhood and surrounding land uses, given the narrow street, limited parking, smaller lot sizes, and reduced setbacks associated with the historic development pattern of this area. That suggests to me that we can and perhaps should focus on those specific aspects of the neighborhood. And if we come to the conclusion it's not compatible, which is what I believe the Planning Commission did, then it would seem to me that we should deny the appeal.
Does this mean that you can never have a short-term rental on Stockton Street?
I would say that has to be judged case by case, but I think the burden would be very difficult to have a short-term rental on Stockton Street, yes. But I don't see us making a blanket decision here. It seems to me we're looking at this house in the context of this portion of Stockton Street.
How about the other findings?
You know, I think there's evidence in the record to support the other findings, and so I think I would endorse the other findings as well. And also, it weighs on my mind that this went through the Planning Commission. It was a 4-0 vote, and obviously they have an order, and it's, to my way of thinking, supported by substantial evidence. So I think there's a real burden here on the appellant to overturn the Planning Commission on something that in the ordinance, the way I perceived it at least, was in the primary area of the Planning Commission. Having said that, I accept this is a de novo appeal, and we have to make the findings ourselves.
Yeah. Look, when the short-term rental ordinance was written, you know, the intention was to try to allow this type of activity unless the neighbors didn't want it in their backyard, so to speak. And it was done as a test period. We continue to have it, but the original intent was always to protect the neighbors. Where I'm torn here is it's not clear to me what's really going on between these neighbors. And has this been brought to the Planning Commission and to us because of neighbor dispute versus the short-term rental actually being a problem? I have a great deal of sympathy for Ms. McQuitty, and I hear her problems with it. At the same time, I hear the neighbor that's arguably maybe not just as close, but very close, saying there are no problems. So it becomes this he said, she said, and it's really challenging for me. And I'm not there yet on either of this. And so what defines the small lot sizes and reduced setbacks, deeming it incompatible? Right? Is it 3 feet? Is it 5 feet? Is it 10 feet? You know, where do we draw that line? But I'm still stuck in the fact that the information we've been given in the path or process through which it's been brought here, it's very gray. It's muddy to me. Where my head's at is, can we put this thing on probation and see what happens over a 6-month period? Now, the problem is you call the cops. You know, how do you really, if bad things are happening and noise and parking is really happening, you know, how do you show that and prove that there is a problem? You know, if I were the neighbor, I'd record them so I could bring it in and here it is. You know, they're allowed and you know, make a video of what time it was. Right now, I'm not sure we're operating on information that is factually correct based on what I've heard tonight. But I'm torn because we wrote this thing to protect the neighborhoods, and I want to make sure we do that. So, not driving us myself towards any conclusion yet, but I wanted to express those feelings.
And along those lines, I have similar feelings. A couple things I want to acknowledge so that we all understand this. It seems clear to me that Mr. Podesta has done a remarkable job trying to make this business work and has tried to satisfy his neighbors the best he can. So I want you to know very clearly that when I'm deciding this case, I'm not deciding it because I think you were deficient. I want you to know that. I think you've done a lot and are willing, and through your letters, you've been willing to say, I'll do more, I'll do whatever it takes. It's not a personal, and this council is not indicting you in any way. I want you to know that. It's a beautiful property, and you need to know that, and you're doing the best you can. My trouble is it the appropriate place for the property, which is a totally different issue. And I want, if I make a decision one way or another, it has nothing to do with how you operate your business. I think some of the comments you made seem to indicate that somehow you were thinking, well, people, or at least this council, was going to hold you accountable personally. I don't have that feeling. I don't think the other council members do, but I can't speak for them. And then the other point that I need to make is a point that was made in the audience, is that irrespective of your operation, there are issues on this street. There are neighborhood issues that are not going to get resolved irrespective of your operation. And so that's what makes it harder for us. The narrow streets, a lot of the things happening, and some of those things, many of those would happen if you weren't there in running this business. So that's another layer on top of it. So those are the things I'm struggling with. They're difficult issues, no question. I'm leaning in the area, as the mayor may be leaning on this first finding. That's a tough finding for me. And I'm struggling. There's, it's a quality of life versus a revenue issue. I know you have a lot of letters from people I greatly respect in the business community saying this is good for our business. This is raising revenue for the city. And so I don't discount that at all. But then on the other hand, we have to balance that with neighborhoods and the sanctity of neighborhoods. So those are the things I'm struggling with. It's not an easy decision, for sure.
Well, I'm struggling also. Just so you don't feel alone, Paul. I'm struggling with this one a lot, and I'm looking at that one finding. It does say limited parking, but I visited the Podesta's house and met with them, and they don't have limited parking. In fact, they have abundant parking, probably more than most houses in St. Helena have. But I'm struggling with this for all the reasons that Greg articulated and all the reasons that Paul articulated, and I have great respect for the speakers on both sides of the issue. And it troubles me. It troubles me. It's sort of, I'm just wondering what is going on here, and I don't like to see our ordinance used against other citizens, used for or against other citizens, and in any kind of punitive manner. And I'm just really, I'm struggling. I guess I have been in my mind trying to find some middle ground, and when Greg said the word probationary period, I sort of went, you know what, that's kind of where I'm headed at this point. Sort of like a one more strike and you're out type of situation, but it would need to be not subjective, somehow objective police there with the rentals, with the renters, etc. So I don't know. I'm basically just talking off the top of my head, but I also reiterate what Paul articulated. This is not a personal condemnation of you at all. I think maybe you've potentially had some bad renters. But there is quite a lot of parking, and I used to take Stockton Street every single day to take my kids to school. There is traffic, but it isn't Oak Avenue. So, Peter?
Okay. I agree with everything everybody has said to this point, and I mean, it really is a tough one. I agree with Paul that I think you've done a great job at doing the best that you can, but does this rise to the level of being a catalyst for neighborhood strife or whatever? I don't know whether, if we deny your appeal, whether that's going to solve anything. I kind of agree with Anna that no, it's not. I mean, the disturbances are still going to happen in the neighborhood, whether you have visitors or you don't have visitors. You know, that's just, I think it's the character of that neighborhood. And if we want to keep that character, you know, I don't know that short-term rental is actually has anything to do with this. So I'm really torn too. I mean, if we take the short-term rental out of it and deny the permit, then what? I mean, so if there's still police calls and everything else, do we kick everybody out of their homes? Is that the remedy?
That issue's not before us.
I know.
Right. And by the way, the issue of whether we are having short-term rentals is not before us either. This is not a discussion of that at all. And so some of the people that have weighed in who aren't directly affected in the neighborhood, I got the impression that a lot of their comments had to do with whether we should have the ordinance at all.
And I think
this is not what we're discussing.
I think that's another issue for another day, and I agree with Anna also on that, you know, when we have some hotels, I think it's time to take a look at this ordinance and see whether it really is necessary to have in our neighborhoods. So I mean, I agree with the mayor, and I think I'm kind of leaning towards a denial of the appeal on the grounds that it is a disturbance to the neighborhood. I mean, it's become the flashpoint. So I don't know.
Just a quick comment in response to your comment about the finding. I read that as limited parking as limited street parking. That's the way I read that finding, as opposed to on-site parking.
See, I think there is limited street parking, but I don't know that the short-term rental at that location is the you know,
It's the reason
has
for it.
any bearing on that.
Well, but I can perhaps see this a little more broadly in the sense that the issue for me is whether a short-term vacation rental at that particular location is or is not compatible with the neighborhood, including the specific things that are set out here. And I'm stuck on I'm stuck because I don't believe it is, and so I would deny the appeal.
So when this was previously renewed, or previously granted, did it come to the Planning Commission?
No, it was under the previous ordinance, and it was.
So there were not enough neighbors to raise it to the level of being reviewed by the Planning Commission. It was granted administratively.
I can't remember if the original ordinance required that notification for a renewal.
No, I mean the original granting of the application.
No, at that point, there was a protest process that was essentially impossible for neighborhoods to abide by. I mean, there's too many properties.
And then when it was renewed,
I don't know that there was the 30% protest rule in effect for renewals at that time. I don't have the institutional knowledge of the previous ordinance.
we believe it was renewed administratively at that point.
It was renewed administratively,
It was,
no
okay.
question.
All right.
Okay.
And just speaking to some of the other options, I don't believe the current ordinance allows for this probationary mechanism. And frankly, from a staff perspective, I think it would be setting up more neighborhood strife because people would be trying to prove one way or another if there was an impact or not.
No, good point.
Yeah. Well, the reason I was asking is if we had a previous set of findings that we didn't find it incompatible, and now we're changing those views and coming up with findings that are very contradictory to those initial findings, I'd just like to be aware of that before we made such a move.
Which we are in some way, right? Originally, when it was granted, we found that it was okay.
The findings have been rewritten, and the regulations are different than the original. So again, it gets back to the de novo question. This application was reviewed by the Planning Commission under the current ordinance, and the Planning Commission could not make the findings based on the testimony and the information provided to them, and they unanimously voted to deny it.
Mm-hmm. If I might weigh in, the fact that the previous decision was made on the basis of findings that would have been in support of the application would not be binding, nor would they be preclusive of a contrary decision here based on the intervening events that the neighbors testified to and staff testified to in connection with the Planning Commission hearing and this evening. So in other words, things change, and your decision tonight is not limited by the previous decision that was made.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
All right. Well,
I guess one other reason that I'm just going to articulate why I'm struggling is there isn't, I don't have any hard evidence of contact between, except for that one noise complaint during the day, of contact between the police and renters. So it does really boil down to a he said, she said, who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth, and I really wish we were not in this predicament to decide a neighborhood, because it feels like this is a neighborhood dispute, which isn't 100% about the ordinance.
Well, I would also point out that, look, I have neighbors that between, even after the hours of 10 p.m. sometimes are very loud. But what the ordinance states is that there will not be excessive noise, or I forget the exact word, after the hours of 10 p.m. I don't think it restricts noise other than amplified noise prior to 10 p.m. And so I just want to make sure that we're, upholding the law that we've put in place, as Anna has pointed out.
So you're discounting that visit by the police.
Well,
in other words, right? It's not. I agree with you.
Yeah.
One other issue that just occurred to me, and I think there was some discussion in my review of the tape. I remember this discussion about the density issue that there were, and I don't know where they are, but could you maybe help clarify where the other properties are that are closest to this? I believe one of the commissioners said on Tainter Street there may be a few there. I'm kind of disturbed by that density issue. It's like the first one in the door gets to say the other ones make it too dense, so I don't leave that for another day, but refresh our recollection as to where they are at this point.
I believe there's a map in the...
Which I could not see, but I want to understand that.
Yeah, unfortunately, this packet, the color is not provided. The map, the short-term rental locations are not apparent in the map that's in the packet, and I apologize for that. That was a discussion point by the Planning Commission. There are, I believe, 3 or 4 within a. I wouldn't want to put an actual distance on it, but the Planning Commission did identify density of short-term rentals in this area as one of their justifications for looking at the character and intensity of the short-term rental use and making the decision to deny the renewal.
well,
And in our regulations, we do specifically state that the owner shall post house policies within each guest bedroom. And, Section A says quiet hours shall be maintained from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., during which noise with or outside the short-term rental dwelling shall not disturb anyone on a neighboring property. B, amplified sound that is audible beyond the property boundaries of the short-term dwelling is prohibited.
And I did visit the Podesta house, and all of that was posted. Actually, the posted quiet hours were 9 to 9.
well,
Look, sorry, one last comment. While I don't disagree necessarily with the first finding that you point out, is it compatible? You can probably say that about at least half of the short-term rentals in this town. And are we really applying a level playing field as we look at this? And that's why I would lean towards, if there are really problems that can be documented and shown, and I think there are ways to do it, then let's consider a probation period where it's like one more strike and you're out.
but I think Mr. House explained that wasn't in our regulation, and I also, quite frankly, agree with his comment that could invite just more strife as folks seek to document this, that, or the other thing, or to prove a negative. I mean, it's.
I wish there had been documentation, frankly.
But want to make it very clear that for myself, these disputes between the neighbors are irrelevant to the way I look at it. I look at it strictly as to whether that house in that location is or is not compatible to the neighborhood, and I'm clear in my mind that it is not.
Mr. Mayor, if I might weigh in, I don't disagree with the planning director at all. The ordinance, I agree that the ordinance does not provide for a probationary period. You might consider, however, the council may want to consider the fact that the ordinance does allow you, if you are inclined to grant an appeal and an application, it does allow you to impose new conditions. I'm not sure if that's something that some of the council members want to discuss or kick around, but that does give you some additional latitude, I think, there.
I.e. a specific condition on this specific permit with respect to specific performance or lack thereof complaints.
I think that your ordinance does allow that, and I know Mr. Housh has expressed that there is also a practical problem as well as an ordinance problem. In other words, how and he would, if at all, be able to enforce that or verify complaints is something that I think would also be appropriate for you to think of. I just wanted to raise the issue that the ordinance itself does allow for the imposition of a condition.
Well, I'm going to move that we deny the appeal.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
As much as it pains me.
Yeah, I'll second it.
All right. Ms. Black, there's a motion on the table.
Councilmember Doring,
Yes.
Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Councilmember Pitts,
No.
Councilmember Kroll,
No.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. This was a very tough
But
decision
can I
for all
just
of us.
make one comment on my no vote? I would have been in favor of granting the appeal with a serious condition attached, which would be one more infraction and objective infraction, and the person would and the permit would have been revoked.
Okay.
And
Well, whatever.
same here.
I mean, that's the reason for my no vote. It wasn't. It was because I trying to find a happy medium.
Okay, that takes us to our next agenda item, and perhaps we should take a 5-minute break that we all know stretches into 8 or 9 minutes. But
You can check the Giant score. Well, you know.
Okay, we're reconvening at 8 minutes of 8, and the next item is 9.2, introduced by title only and waive the first reading of an ordinance to amend Chapter 13.32 Stormwater and Runoff Pollution Control of the St. Helena Municipal Code to fulfill provisions E6A of the State Water Resources Control Board Water Quality Order Number 2013-001 DWQ, NPDES General Permit Number CAS 000004. And that, I believe, it goes to Mr. Palmer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Tobias Barr, project manager, and who runs the stormwater compliance program for me, is going to do the presentation.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Mayor, member of council. So this is related to our stormwater permit and our storm drain system in the city. The storm drain system does drain directly to the rivers and creeks around town, and we do operate that under a 5-year permit through the Regional Water Board. And throughout that 5 years, there are different requirements that the permit rolls out. And this is a new requirement to specifically have administrative fines for violations. There are other enforcement actions that the city uses before it begins to fine a party. So it's certainly not, and you can see here in the ordinance under A, the pre-existing enforcement actions. So that includes verbal warnings, letters, and other things. So really the administrative fine is something that we would use, as a last resort. This is, again, a new requirement with the permit. So everyone that also, all the other cities who have this permit are also required to have administration, the authority to have administrative citations, excuse me. What we're proposing is $250 for the first violation or the first offense, and second offense is $600 per violation, and every additional offense would be $1,000. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on this. Currently, I will say the authority we have is to charge them with a misdemeanor, which isn't very practical unless it's a toxic substance or something pretty bad that gets dumped down the storm drain.
All right. Are there any preliminary questions?
Can you give us some examples of what violations would be, typical ones that you guys see?
So we're pretty lucky. We don't see a lot. There are various regulations that we inspect for on construction sites in terms of best management practices to make sure dirt and materials and things don't get washed off the site. Another typical violation is an illicit discharge, where there's evidence or you witness an actual substance that's not rainwater going down into the storm drain, and that can be a spill. It's typical in town. We've had problems with restaurants dumping like their mop water or washing their mats or something in the street. So we have been doing inspections and education outreach. So those are the typical violations.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any other preliminary questions? Let me open the public hearing. Anybody wish to speak to this at public hearing? I'll close the public hearing. Any further council discussion?
A little quicker, Mary.
Well,
Move to approve.
is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Ms. Black?
You're adopting staff's recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm sorry, who is the second?
I am.
Doring. Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Pitts?
Yes.
Kroll? Yes. Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. All right, that takes us to new business. First item is 10.1, request for design review and building permit fee waiver from Sun and Stars Montessori School totaling approximately $3,162, and expedited development review process. Mr. Hausch.
Thank you, Mayor Galbraith, and members of the council. Yes, item 10.1 is a request from Sun and Stars Montessori School to reduce or eliminate the development review fees for a proposed shade structure and expedite the development review process for that structure. Some background: on September 15th of this year, the mayor and city manager received a letter from parents of Sun and Stars Montessori School children requesting that the city waive the required fee for design review for a proposal to install an approximately 500 square foot shade structure over the play area at that school. It's located at, 1425 Oak Avenue. As you well know, the zoning code requires design review for any new building or structure or for exterior addition or alteration of those structures. Based on this, staff determined that the request from Sun and Stars would require approval of a design review exemption from the Planning Commission. In addition, a building permit will be required to construct or install that structure on the property. Total fees, if the council chose to waive the entire application for design review and building permit fees, would total approximately $3,162. Obviously, fiscal impacts vary depending on what the council recommendation is. It could be anything from zero if the council recommends not any reduction or expedited process, to not only impact of that fee to the general fund, but also additional impacts associated with the cost for expedition of the review process. Staff's recommending or requesting that the council discussion provide direction on the request from Sun and Stars Montessori School to waive or significantly reduce the permitting costs for the shade structure, as well as their request to expedite the design review and building permit review processes.
All right. Any initial comment? Is there anybody here that would like to speak on behalf of the school? Yes, please come to the podium.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. My name is Tammy Harbison, and I'm the Executive Director at Sun and Stars Montessori School. And thank you for putting this item on the agenda tonight. So we are a nonprofit local preschool, and like many other nonprofit preschools, fundraised for construction paper. And we're in this dilemma of needing shade in our backyard because the students are exposed. They're outside playing and they're completely exposed, and we weren't expecting this kind of fee to be in the mix. So we have fundraised to purchase a shade structure. We're even willing to do a single post umbrella style that's a little smaller. We don't foresee any neighbor issues that we rent from the church, which is the United Methodist Church on Adams. And there are direct neighbors. Behind us are some businesses and a large parking lot. And to the left of us is a home with multiple rental spaces used by students that are not there for long term. So if there's anything you can do to help reduce fees or eliminate the site review permit fees, we would appreciate it.
All right. Any questions of Ms. Harbison? Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to speak at public comment? Yes, please, come forward.
Hi, my name is Genevieve Mann. Excuse the accent, it may be a little bit difficult to understand me. I think the request tonight, I just wanted to reiterate some of the points. The shade structure is just a $6,000 structure that every one of us parents have spent a lot of time fundraising for. We initially thought that the fees were about $16,000, so it's $16,000, so it's pleasing to understand that they're only $3,000, but we do feel that is a substantial amount of our fundraising going to council fees when the shade structure is just $6,000. And I'd just like to ask a question to the director. When did this whole process actually start? It was a good 2 years ago. So again, that is our reason for expedition of this. Our children are out there every day playing under the sun. And for this process to take 2 years, we feel is a very lengthy time for something that is simply a shade structure. And we do appreciate and understand all of the St. Helena ordinance and local legislation. So we appreciate our opportunity to come.
Thank you very much. All right.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? All right, I'll close the public comment and invite council discussion. Does anybody wish to leave off?
I'll lead on this one. To me, I think this is a fairly simple shade structure that looks like it's actually beautiful and well done, and it's sort of pre-engineered by a company that builds these things. My only concern is making sure that it's mounted properly and installed properly so that it's safe for the kids. But I'm 100% supportive of waiving these fees, and such that we don't end up having a 50% surcharge to the installation of a large umbrella. And doing what we can to expedite the process as quickly as we can.
Ms. Kroll?
Are you saying you're in favor of waiving all fees? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you saying, Greg, are you in favor of waiving all fees or just a different amount?
I'd like to waive all fees on this one.
Okay, well, I guess, I feel like there should be some fees, just otherwise it's going to set a precedent. Unless we have a policy for nonprofits. Do we have a policy for waiving fees for nonprofits, or it's a case-by-case basis?
We don't have a policy.
No, we don't have a policy.
There is no.
The fees do seem out of proportion to the cost of the structure and what it is, but.
So keep in mind, this is your municipal code and the fees that were adopted by the city council. This is what staff follows. It's the fee structure.
No, I know. I don't doubt that. It's just seeing it in action for a nonprofit.
I just want to be clear, because sometimes a comment like that, there's a perception that it's something that we make up, and it's not. We're following a council-adopted fee structure, and the municipal code the way it's written. And in this city, that structure needs to be reviewed. So that's all we've done through this process.
No, I know. I trust you. It's just the impact on a nonprofit seems to be. I'd like to pass.
Okay. We'll get back to you. By our rules, you must vote at some point.
Oh, I'm going to vote, and I just want to see what everybody else has to say.
All right, Mr. Doring.
Well, it seems like from reviewing the staff report, it looks like there's two different issues going on. One is the delay, and maybe we don't need to get into that. We're conflating the delay issues and this 2-year process. I don't know what's true or false or what that is all about. And then the issue of cost relative to the structure. I'm sympathetic to the cost being a little high for the structure. For me, I'm cursed by thinking like a lawyer, so I'm thinking, I don't really like the process where it's willy-nilly, and when someone comes in, we just say, go ahead and waive that. I like a process, a policy, a precedent. So I go, this is, because someone else is going to come in, the Catholic Church is going to come in and say, we want to waive fees for that building we're building right there. That's an extreme example. Of course, that wouldn't happen, but so that's my fear of who comes in following this, what precedent is set after this, and I'm a little concerned about that. I'm very sympathetic to the issue. Obviously, we all have children. We understand that sun is dangerous and you want to protect children. So you have the delay on one hand. Maybe that's not the issue before us. And you may have an explanation or some further comments. I'd be happy to receive them. But without pointing to some precedent where we've done that before, I'm a little troubled by it, even though I'm very sympathetic.
Well,
can I respond to that? Look, I tie the delay to my comments of waiving the fees. I'm sort of looking at it holistically. There's been quite some time that's passed, and I don't think we need to go back and figure out why. For that reason, I don't know that this will actually set precedent, and that's why I'm supportive of waiving the fees in this instance, so that they can move forward and get the umbrella up quickly, and not have to further fundraise, be able to pay the fees for the sake of the kids who don't have a place to be outside right now. And it's too bad the tree came down. I wish the tree were still there, because we wouldn't have to have this discussion. But really, what we're trying to do is replace the shade of that tree. And I see it as sort of a health and safety issue, and so that's why I'm so supportive of it. In addition to the delay.
Mr. Hausch, have you got a comment here?
I was just going to maybe address the delay issue. I think it's been two years since the tree came down. and we've had discussions maybe over the last year and a half or so. Unfortunately, the mechanism that staff has to bring these actions for decision is the application. And so without having that application, we had no mechanism to bring any of these requests before the council until the letter was written by the parents and the mayor asked that it be put on. And there's some back and forth conversations, emails over the last year, essentially, between myself and some of the Sun and Stars folks. So the council's free to read that. But I would just point out that maybe the council could consider it is very common for municipalities to have reduced or waived fees specifically for child care providers. So not getting to the nonprofit as broad as Councilmember Kroll mentioned, because frankly, nonprofits can do a variety of things. But it is a very common thing for that type of policy to be in a general plan. And so this may be something that the council could consider at a future date to actually set policy. And I just wanted to add that it is not an uncommon thing for municipalities to consider.
I have a question for you, and that is with respect to the request that the application process be expedited. I'm concerned that the planning department worries that could impact other things it's doing. And what does it mean for this to happen? And if we don't expedite it, what does it mean?
So it depends on the direction from the council. Just to be frank, such a small type of project is not going to be a significant process. So our standard process would, I believe, get this through the design review and then onto the building permit in a fairly acceptable way to from development review timeframe standards to the applicants here or the Sun and Stars folks. So I don't think it would be a significant impact if they were to just file and we would take them through the process. What it could be is if the council directed us to put this application in front of any other applications that are in process. That could impact us. But other than that, I think we could accommodate their desires to get some shade up in a relatively acceptable time frame without impacting other processes.
Okay, that sounds good.
And I'd be fine if there were some reduced fee. I mean, my real problem is that it's 50% of the project cost, right, is what it sounds like. And that's where, maybe that's what's in our code, and it's fine, we're following what's in our code, but it just seems out of whack. And that's where I jumped in so aggressively so quickly.
I must say, I think the planning director offered us just a perfect rationale.
Yeah.
And we can set a policy saying we're making an exception here, but we will look forward to a policy where we will consider waiving fees for child care centers in the future if they're operated by not-for-profits. I mean, that seems, and if there's a real health and safety issue involved, that seems to me quite reasonable, and to use that as our standard for this evening. So if folks are generally agreeable with that, Chair would entertain a motion to waive the fees, but not direct planning staff to expedite the matter. Right? They're going to handle that reasonably within their own current processes anyway.
Because it'll be quick.
Yeah.
Right. So moved.
Second.
Ms. Black.
Councilmember Pitts?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Kroll?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Thank you very much for coming in this evening, and you're free to go. So the next item, 10.2, consideration of proposed adoption of a resolution authorizing the city manager to opt into PG&E's LED street lighting program, replacing Pacific Gas and Electric's owned high-pressure sodium vapor streetlights with LED streetlights, and I would add on certain specific streets, not across town. Mr. Palmer, is that you?
Tobias Barr, project manager, is going to give the
Mr.
presentation
Barr.
for this one as well.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and hello again. I prepared a presentation with Director Palmer that I'd like to take you through real quick before, and then hopefully answer all your questions on the strategy that we've come up with in Public Works for this program. Point at... Ooh. There. Maybe the battery is. Anyway, Cindy can do it for me. Thank you. So this is a PG&E managed program. As it says in the staff report, most of the street lights in town, of the 479, I believe, street lights we have in town, 325 of those are PG&E owned. and that falls under their LS1 street lighting tariff. And in PG&E's last general rate case, the CPUC did approve a replacement program for those LS1 PG&E-owned streetlights, and that is specifically to replace the HPSV, which is high pressure sodium vapor, which you're probably familiar with.
Too familiar.
Yeah, these are the non-decorative streetlights, and the proposed replacement is with high efficiency LED streetlights. But council must take action to opt in, and PG&E came to us with this program. I believe it was late September, and they are moving through Napa County and heading up north. So we have an opportunity here to get this done if we'd like in the next couple months. Next slide, please. So because it's funded through the rate structure, there's actually no additional cost to the city because the streetlights are 50% more efficient. The program is paid for through the rate structure, and it actually reduces the rate. So there are some savings because of the 50% efficiency. They are 4,000 Kelvin rated color spectrum LED lights, which do improve LED lights in general, improve illumination. Because of their lighting efficacy, they are very focused light. And we did discuss this with the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee, and they do support the opting into the program. Next slide, please. So here's just what PG&E has chosen. Again, these are their lights, and they are Cree lights. Cree is a leader with LED lighting technology. LED lights, if you're not familiar, they're stable output. You may have noticed before the high pressure sodium lights. Sometimes they flicker, they get hot, and they turn off. The 4,000 Kelvin is the color spectrum, color temperature rating on the PG&E lights. That's the only option they're giving us at this time. And these lights do have, they're a large improvement from the high pressure sodium lights because they do have the full cutoff, meaning they're very focused. You can see that rim around the fixture there provides a cutoff, which focuses the light directly on the area below the light, and that reduces glare and minimal light trespass. And for that reason, the Cree lights, along with some other LED manufacturer lights, are Dark Sky Association certified, and that is the association that's dedicated to reducing light pollution in the world. Next slide, please. So benefits, which I've already touched on, this is going to reduce our street lighting costs, and it does greatly improve energy efficiency and sustainability, reduces our energy use and greenhouse gas emissions associated with that, and it provides improved illumination and so potentially improved safety on roadways. The concerns, these technologies are constantly evolving. There's a recent report from the American Medical Association that talks about some of the issues with LED streetlights because they are intense light, and they recommend a maximum. They have a few recommendations in their report. It's very broad. Their audience is very broad, right? They're speaking to communities everywhere, high density urban communities, probably more so than rural communities like St. Helena. So they recommend 3,000 Kelvin, which is more of an orange color, and they have some other recommendations for dimmability and things like that. And so because these standards may change, and we certainly recognize and appreciate the character of St. Helena, being able to see the stars in town and residents being very sensitive to street lighting and night lighting, that we've determined a good way to move forward at this time would be to focus on Main Street and commercial areas and park areas that have our PG&E owned lights in them. So there's a map, I believe, on the next slide. And the blue there, I should have shown that, but the blue line there is where we're proposing the street light replacements, and I believe it's about 80 street lamps. So as you can see, they're in the commercial areas there south of Mills Lane. There are really only a few street lights down in that area. In our parks, in the park area where there's some PG&E owned lights there in Crane Park, and then up and down the Main Street corridor, up Railroad, up a section of Oak Street, which has just a few street lights on it, and mostly I think there's really just a few homes, and I evaluated those locations, and the lights are not in close proximity to the homes on that road on Oak Avenue there. So currently this is our proposal to City Council, and we'd like to get some direction from you. I think that's the last slide. Was there another slide there? So the direction we're actually asking from Council tonight is to approve our recommendation to opt in our non-residential corridors. This will give us the opportunity to, utilize these lights for the high traffic areas and the areas with a lot of the most activity in St. Helena at nighttime, while waiting to see if any standards change and letting us evaluate the quality of this lighting before we decide to put it in residential areas. And of course, the other options are direct us to not opt into the program at all, or you could tell us to go ahead and move forward with replacing all street lights in town with the LED replacement. So with that, I'm happy to take your questions and have a discussion.
I just have one quick preliminary question. On Adams Street, where it says Main Street end, since I walk up and down Adams Streets all the time, I think what you mean here is going east rather than west.
Could you go back to that?
It says Adams Street, Main Street end. I assume Main Street, you're going east and not going west.
That's correct.
All
right.
Right. So I misconstrued that only because of my own bias. But there we are.
Talk a little bit about Crane Park and where the lights are relative to the neighborhood across the street.
Sure. In this, well, I do have, and it's a little confusing. Would you mind passing those around?
With that South Crane, right?
Okay. Here's my let that load up for a minute, and you can pass those out around. So every dot here is where these streetlights are. All 325 of them.
Wow, that's a lot of them.
Oh, wow.
So obviously we're not proposing to replace all those. So you can see the two here. So there are two street lights against South Crane there, and I did take a look at those. They are illuminating the park side of Crane at the entrances to the park. There is a couple homes in close proximity to the furthest north one. It is the lower wattage, and we can change those to both the lower wattage. You can see one's a different color pin, which represents a higher wattage, and we can adjust those with PG&E, but the blue is the lowest wattage they offer. Keep that in mind. So from a staff perspective, I don't, because again, these are very focused lights with much reduced light pollution over the existing. My hunch is that it's not going to be a problem. If it is a problem, we can ask PG&E to add an additional, I forget what they're calling it. It's like a shield, right? That will further shield the light from that direction. So it's just, it's very directional, and they put it on the area of the rim of that cobra head to further shade the direction of that light.
So I have a question, and it really ties to the health impacts. I looked at some articles, Harvard University, I think their medical school did a recent study on maybe impacts beyond what the AMA has published, and they're sort of unknown because they haven't fully delved into this, but there's certainly the human circadian rhythmicity, if I pronounced that properly, which can lead to sleep impacts. There's some discussion of, it's really the blue wavelengths as you get up to this 4,000 kVs that can cause retina damage. And is that if you look straight at it? They say that it can also cause glare and make it harder to see for safe driving or walking at night. And, when you look at, it's just think about this from a benefit cost analysis standpoint. There's unknown risks out there. 4,000 seems to be too high. Other communities are saying it's too high. It should really be 3,000 or less. If we don't push back on PG&E and say we want 3,000, then how are we ever going to get the appropriate lighting for our community? And so the savings are, $4,000 a year in operating expenses, right? Is that what I read in the staff report?
That's if we opted in every light in town.
Every light. So if we did half, it's $2,000. And we got 6,000, residents, $1 of impact, the benefit cost doesn't even work, right? So I'm having a hard time with this, and to me, I want to at least explore why aren't we getting better lights that are closer to the 3,000 kV intensity versus the 4,000, where the prevailing sort of wisdom and judgment from the AMA is saying move towards that.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is one of the reasons why we've chosen to specifically do the recommend the corridors that don't have residents, because the quality of the blue light is much more appropriate for corridors that are traveled. And unfortunately, there aren't any standards coming from Caltrans or other transportation authorities. But and I know Director Palmer, as an engineer, has some thoughts on this as well. But the trend is even with communities such as Davis and others who have swapped out their some of their LED streetlights for 3,000K, they're keeping 4,000K and above on their highly traveled corridors and arterials and things.
So that's where I'm confused, because the AMA is saying that it leads to pupillary constriction and that can cause problems seen clearly for safe driving. So I feel like there's conflicting info out there.
I think what you're seeing is probably the same thing we struggle with. Is there seems to be constantly evolving, right? And the industry is pushing towards LED streetlights. It's that's the way the world is going right now, and so what we're looking at, these are PG&E streetlights, and we don't city doesn't own them. The PG&E, and they're recommending the 4K, and we can certainly push back some, and we have, and we've said let's focus on this one area as a way to get started with the program. While we wait to see how these things shake out. As Tobias alluded to, we're seeing one side of things with these studies. It's all in the health impacts, which generally are studies focused in on a lot of indoor light pollution and very kind of specific. I don't know how to explain, but it's very specific, looking for health impacts.
Yeah.
And we're not seeing. I want to say we're not seeing a bigger environmental study. We're not seeing the illumination side of things, the safety side of things that the traffic folks, the transportation folks, and kind of the electrical engineering folks look at when you talk about lighting is the illumination factor, and there's a balance between transportation needs and between the health impacts, and so that's why we're coming with this recommendation of let's start with 80 lights, and St. Helena is not the leader in this. It's happened all over the state already. PG&E's program is for their whole service area. It's not just Napa Valley. They've already started. They've done it over in Santa Rosa and Sonoma County. They've done some down in the city of Napa already. They've done it in Sacramento and West Sacramento, and Tobias mentioned Davis. I noticed myself on all the interstates now, anything new and the new interchanges, they all have the LED streetlights in there, and those are I'm sure they're much higher than 4,000 Kelvin, because those are the big, tall poles. They got to cover a broader area. So I wouldn't hesitate. I hope the council wouldn't hesitate because they feel like they're being pushed in one direction by PG&E alone. I think this is the way the industry's going, and we do recognize that we should be patient, we should be thoughtful, and that's why we're saying let's just do 80 and see how they look and what the impacts are.
And by the way, the AMA certainly recommends moving towards LED. They're just they're arguing over whether it should be 4,000 or 3,000 or less, right? So, have any communities put these 4,000 kV lights in and then gone back and taken them out because they were not satisfactory that we're aware of?
I haven't heard of any that have done the 4,000 ones and taken them out. I have heard when the early rollouts happened a few years ago, I think, that's why I showed me some studies from Portland maybe, and I know it happened in Davis and Sacramento, in Sacramento they replaced them in residential areas with, I can't remember what the Kelvin rating was on, but they did go back and have to go and replace them.
And
that's what we're trying to avoid.
Higher than 4,000?
I think they were like 5.
I think they were around 5.
Yeah.
And that's why we're saying let's start again. That's why we've kind of trimmed it down. Let's start with 80 and see.
Can we do a smaller amount? I mean, is there some flexibility with PG&E to do a smaller amount? I mean, they're not going to get all this done in one day anyway, right? So could we do a smaller amount, test it, see how the community feels, and maybe in a place where, it's I don't know, north end of town, south end of town, less impacts, and see what we think. So, and if we like it, then move forward with the other that you've suggested.
Right.
Or
So this is the conversation that I've had with PG&E was that, St. Helena, we're doing the whole Upper Valley right now, and we want to do everybody at once, and we are going to roll this. We're going to order a bunch of lights. It's cost effective for us. We're going to order a whole bunch of lights all at once. We're going to mobilize our contract all at once. We're going to hit everybody. And if you guys don't opt in the right timing, timing doesn't work, we'll have to come back to you later. And so and we don't know when they can't commit to when that will be. It's contingent upon whether there's funding available. And I mean, this is the story that we get from PG&E and it's factual. I mean, they have a set budget, they have money, they're ready to go. And if we're not ready and we don't go with them, then we have to wait our turn again for them to come back to us. Now, I don't know if Tobias, have you had any more specific conversation about how many? I know they originally wanted to do 325, and we said, well, we want to do a small area. And there was a little bit of pushback at that point that, well, St. Helena, if you don't do all of them now, we don't know when we'll get to you.
Have we been in conversation with the surrounding cities to see what their position is, to say, look, hold firm on this?
Well, Napa,
don't order these and force them to.
City Napa already did it. City Napa already did it, and we haven't heard any negative from them about it. I mean, certainly, and then Calistoga opted in 2 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think some of these negative issues were from earlier technologies. Before they were really looking at cutoff and really designing the fixture to be very effective and not causing light pollution.
What is cutoff?
The cutout here, I have a.
It's where it's got kind of shade on the sides.
Okay.
So
I think there's a graphic in the staff report.
Kind of spread out.
And just to be clear, I don't want light pollution, but that's not my concern here. You can put the shield on it to ensure that you don't have excess light pollution. It's more the unknown health impacts that I'm sort of worried about.
Right. Just to get back to the PG&E schedule. So this is good through their 2017 rate case. They will. I would imagine that they would include it in their next general rate case. I would be shocked if, with all the sustainable and climate programs in California that are coming down from the state, if they did not. That said, I don't have a crystal ball. So who knows? Maybe it won't be in their next general rate case. I am very confident it will be, but I am not sure if the costs will change, and the costs could increase. So if we do wait, we may be looking at increased costs.
Let me interrupt here for a moment and open the public hearing. And does anybody wish to speak at the public hearing? No?
I'm speaking as a resident. My name is Bobby Monette, and I think it's a great idea for these lights, but I'm thinking, I really agree with Councilmember Pitts. I think, first of all, we could go, maybe Steve could do it on his way home from work sometime when it's dark. Why put them in here to check them out? Why not go where they're already existent to check? We can go to Napa and see what the 4,000 looks like. We can go to Davis and see what the 3,000 looks like, and see if that seems adequate. And it seems to me if we're going to do a few, put up a few just to test it out or, to see how it works, that we would start with the 3,000 because there's not as much risk based on the data that we have, which is all we can base anything on. I think we should start at a level where there's the least possible risk to public, to our eyes. There are a lot of old people, including myself, in this town, and older people have light issues when they're driving anyway. I don't, but a lot of people do. So, if we're going to, I would just suggest starting at a lower level for this and checking it out in other places first to see if there's really, if it would seem inadequate to have a 3,000, whatever they are, on the main corridor. But I'm very concerned about the health risks as well. So.
I don't think we have a choice over 3,000 or 4,000.
Let's finish the public comment and then we'll
Sorry.
go back.
Jeff Ellsworth, Sylvaner. I also heard from some folks on the AMA report talking about the health conditions or risk of serious health conditions, including cancer and cardiovascular disease, and cautioned that the lights can impair nighttime driving vision. And I think that the idea of LEDs being more efficient and the way that the industry is going is a good thing, but I think it's pointing out that difference between 4,000 and 3,000 and the difference between the amber and the blue light. It also talks about the harmful effects of bright LEDs on wildlife, particularly nocturnal animals, birds, and insects. So if we create a corridor that's disruptive to them and then it starts spreading out, we still do live in a rural area with a lot of forest around us. So there's that consideration. And there is a mention, this is from the Washington Post, but there was a mention about a city in Lake Worth, Florida, and they're looking at the amber lights too, which is the lower Kelvin. I said, we found a color that made sense for the health of our city, and we're proud of the choice we made. My thought too is if we can go someplace else and look at them and see them, if we can try a small amount and see how the reaction is before moving to a large commitment, and then if it's decided that the only thing to do is to accept the 4,000, I would say it has to be with reaching out to other communities who want the 3,000 and urge PG&E to make a compromise themselves and say, we want to stand with other communities for the health of our citizens and our wildlife and our communities. So if we can find a way maybe to talk to some other communities, say, hey, let's talk to PG&E together and see if that gives us a little more weight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further public comment? Okay, I'll close the public comment and invite further discussion. But from what I understand, is Calistoga replacing all of its lights, or is it replacing just some as you propose here?
Again, well, they're replacing all of their LS1 lights. So again, I want to just clarify this. I mean, for us, we're kind of unique because it's 320. It's most of our lights. They're PG&E owned. So this program is for PG&E owned lights. So they say, city, we're going to replace all the lights we own in your city with this new fixture. And do you want to say yes or no? So we don't. Again, the city doesn't have control over the Kelvin level of these lights. It's whatever they're offering now. So the choice is: do you want to go with 4,000, or city? Do you want to wait and not do it and keep your high pressure sodium for the foreseeable future?
I will say, follow up with Steve on that. I did read today that Calistoga has actually opted in all of their LS1 lights, and I did read that they've decided to upgrade their own lights to LEDs as well. So,
and is that the
they're
4,000 Kelvin?
They're the 4,000, right?
Okay.
So
they
the
seem pretty
4,000,
confident.
what's really being produced and what's on the market, are the 3,000s like twice as much? What's really going on here?
No, the costs are very similar, and from what I understand, the 3,000 Kelvin lights are actually a little bit more energy efficient. What's going on is that these are intended to light the street, and for the most part, I think they do light the street. They don't spill into people's homes, and they provide the best quality light for visibility on a roadway.
They being the 4,000.
So
The 4,000K. That's my understanding of the advantages of more blue and white light. It's better visibility. I know there's been issues that you've mentioned. Again, I from my experience with these lights, I haven't experienced that. The glare issues and the issues of difficult visibility. Certainly with a very bright LED light, I've experienced that, but not with the 4,000K lights I've seen around, and certainly where I live in Santa Rosa.
Are they giving us an option to have dimmers on these lights?
No, I talked to them about that because that is, I think, one of the emerging potential standard changes. So the Cree light that they are using is compatible with those control technologies, but PG&E is not offering it at this time.
That's a way to control in non-peak hours. You sort of dim them down, so maybe from 11 p.m. on or something like that, so there's less impact if there's going to be impact on the wildlife.
And that's, if we waited, that is something that might come along in the future.
Or you add it on.
Right.
Maybe at your own expense, or with PG&E if they sponsor that. So I want to make sure I understand this. I understand the savings per year might be, for what has been recommended, $2,000, right? But you think there might also be some opportunity cost of not doing it now, because the rate structure that they're offering now could be a different rate structure if we waited a year or two to see where the industry goes?
Right.
Or to try to get some collective bargaining with other communities to get some more appropriate lighting for this part of Napa.
Right. So their rate structure, they've built in the depreciation of the existing fixture, and they've tried to anticipate installation costs and things like that. So that's what the current approved rate structure has, which ends in 2017. So, whatever we get in decide to do before 2017, and hope, I'm assuming that we'd be able to get in the queue. After 2017, it's a new rate case program. Then the cost could change, and what the CPUC approves could change.
What's our deadline
and
here?
it never goes down. That we can guarantee.
What's the deadline that they're sort of trying to impose?
I haven't checked in with them in the program manager for this in a couple weeks, but last I spoke with her, they wanted to mobilize late this month and pretty much do the Napa Valley and Upper Napa Valley, in November. I guess they move pretty quickly. So it would be, I think she mentioned they thought they would be coming back down to this area in the next spring or summer and could try and get us in the queue again. So potentially, 6 months or so.
Yeah, I would, for the council's benefit, I would make the decision based on, if we don't approve it tonight at some level, that we wouldn't be in this first round and we'd wait till spring. That's based on my discussions with
But
PG&E
still in
representatives.
2017 and within the
I mean, that's the potential. I mean, we don't know until the new, I guess, for the spring, Tobias, that we wouldn't know unless they're non-committal on that when I've talked to them. I don't know if you've had any substantive conversations. They said, well, maybe, it's a maybe, it's potential. That'd be the next chance. But
if we don't opt in and a bulb goes out that they own, do they just keep replacing them with the high-pressure sodium vapor bulbs for now?
That's correct.
And what are the negatives with that?
It's just
Cost more.
Yeah, it's a cost efficiency
in
and
a year based on this recommended.
That's right.
It costs more, and it creates more light pollution, right?
Well, and those bulbs go out too, and they don't get fixed necessarily very quickly. I quite frankly dislike those sodium vapor bulbs and would like to see them go. But having said that, there are serious concerns here, which But at the end of the day, at least for me, I'm prepared to accept the staff recommendation here.
Yeah, me too. I think staff has done a great job on research and negotiation with PG&E, and I'm ready to make a motion.
Any other comment before?
In terms of the cost of these lights that are 3,000 Kelvin, are any communities proposing potentially to share the cost with PG&E so it makes it easier them, or give them an incentive to go in that direction? Or has that ever been discussed?
I haven't heard of that as an option from them. No, the only word I've heard from PG&E is that these are our lights, and this is the lights bulbs we want to use, basically. I mean, have you ever heard anything about otherwise, Tobias?
No, I haven't. Not for the LS1 lights. That would be something that would, I think, have to go all the way up to the PUC approval.
What's the LS1 light? What do you mean by that?
So that's just the rate structure where they own the light. So any light that is a LS1 light, and they're all listed on our bills, are lights that they own, and we pay them a fee to provide that light and all the energy and all the repairs and maintenance to that light.
So, with these LED streetlights, the CRE, is it the same housing that would have a 4,000 kV light as if you were to go 3,000?
That's correct. It's
same equipment, it's just different bulbs.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah, different fixture.
And what do these bulbs cost as a percentage of the fixture in the housing? Do we have any idea?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I could make a guess, but I have no idea.
And look, I know they want us to decide tomorrow. I'm just wondering if, can we have a discussion about the 3,000? Are they hearing this from others? I mean, it sounds like you've asked and they've said, no, these are the bulbs, take it or leave it. But maybe these bulbs don't cost all that much. And if we decided in a year we wanted to swap them out because certain other information came out about the health effects, we could propose that to PG&E or maybe, force them to swap it out. But, and I know you want to move forward, at least two of you, but I'm still wondering, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? And I know you've pushed some with these guys. I'm wondering if there's just one more round of questions that might help us get something that's a better suited for this community.
And what is Yountville doing?
I actually don't know what Yon Hill has done. Do you?
No. Not sure what they're doing.
I guess we didn't do the research to see if they took action on it or not.
But the city of Napa has the 4,000, and from what you hear, there's been essentially no complaint about them.
That's right. And actually, in the packet, this is from PG&E's presentation on this that they gave to us, and that we presented to the Active Transportation Sustainability Committee. There's a little survey about the quality of the light, whether or not people like it. It's a telephone survey that they did, PG&E did, and it's coming up on the screen there. And it shows overwhelming support for the LED color of the LED lights over the yellowish high-pressure sodium. So,
well, that's great, but I didn't know that reading my laptop in the dark was bad for my eyes until my eye doctor told me it was, and he gave me reading glasses that have a protective coat on it to avoid those blue wavelengths, right? So it's great that you like the way it looks, and I've driven under it, and I'm like, oh, it's really cool, but I feel like sometimes it almost feels like it's staggering, right? Or there's almost like this this element to the lighting that I hadn't seen before. That is, for me, has been, maybe those were 5,000, right? When I've noticed that extra bright light.
And I'm just trying to respond to the question whether what has been the response in other communities, which is
right.
what I was.
Well, it seems to me like we have a practical choice here, which is either to go with the staff recommendation or not to go with it and take our chances that PG&E's thinking might change a little bit, be a little more flexible 6 months from now, if we're fortunate enough that the program is made available 6 months from now to us. That seems to me like our option.
Well, what if we did less? What if we didn't do the Crane Park light, since we are worried about the health effect and that's our park? And what if we just did Main Street or the LaFata.
Well, I think, from what I heard, but maybe I'm wrong here, that
They want to do all of theirs. right?
PG&E says, hey, if we're coming into your community, we have to do at least a certain minimum number.
That's effectively what they said, and I don't recall what that minimum number, what it is. If Tobias does, I don't.
I did show them the proposal we have. They seem to be happy with that. After I dug into this tariff and the structure of it, and found out that it actually is paying for the full depreciation of the existing lamp and installation cost. I pushed back on them a little bit. So I don't know if they actually have the authority to make us only do a certain amount.
Well, we do meet in 2 weeks again, and I mean, do we need to decide this tonight, or can we get some more information and push back a little bit more, see if we could exclude Crane Park, since there are some residences there, and at a minimum, and just get some answers to some of these additional questions that have come up.
I would say if council has a couple of streets right now they like us to take off the list, we could approve the recommendation that way. We'll take it to PG&E, and then if they say sorry, then we're not going to come at all, then we'll come back to you.
Yeah, look,
I'd rather take council recommendation now, get them struck from take them off the list, go back to PG&E with this is what the council direction was, and then if they have a problem with that or we can't come to some resolution, we'll come back.
Yeah, look, I love the fact that it's the same equipment and it's the bulbs that are interchangeable, so we have that optionality down the road. We might find out that optionality costs us more to change, but it probably doesn't. So which roads are problematic? I mean, I got specific letters
Oak
about.
Avenue also.
Yeah. I mean, what if we kept it to? I mean, look, there are residences on Main Street too. So
Yeah, that's
it's
true.
not. This is not just we've put these on 29 and it's all commercial.
Quite frankly, as city engineer, public works director, I have to say, I mean, these are the appropriate streets that I would say if you're going to look to streets that are high traffic, where you want to have higher illumination and you want to make sure the quality light is there for traffic safety and pedestrian safety, these are the streets I would look at. And I think if the council said take out Crane Park, I think that we could do that. That wouldn't be I wouldn't have a huge concern. But if so, like for example, 29, if Caltrans came in at some point and said we want to change all out, put LEDs in there, they would say 4,000, and I think that would be a satisfactory recommendation because of the traffic volumes and the need for illumination, regardless of the homes along that stretch.
I don't necessarily want to get into justifying where we do it based on safety, because I don't know that we have a safety issue right now. I think it's more about being a little more eco-groovy with higher efficiency lighting and also getting some new equipment and getting it at a good cost, but at the same time, making sure we're taking into consideration the health effects. Maybe there are other accidents because of the fact that there's too low of lighting along Main Street right now.
My point was just to speak to the 3,000 versus 4,000 question. I think 4,000, the areas we've shown are ones that are appropriate for 4,000 in my mind.
Right. In the future, we might switch to 3,000 elsewhere.
Elsewhere, right. I would think that that's what we kind of honed in these areas. I think there's a good argument that these should be the 4,000, and you wouldn't want to go down to a 3,000 in those.
Got it. Okay.
Locations.
Has the city ever done a light audit to see where we need light, where light is insufficient?
No.
My mic's on.
No.
So I would make a motion that we adopt the staff recommendation, but remove Crane Park from the list. Even though I think Crane Park is under illuminated anyway, but as soon as the tennis court lights go out, it's dark.
All right, is there a second? I will second it.
Vice Mayor White.
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes.
Councilmember Doring.
No.
Pitts. Councilmember Pitts.
I'd like to get more information. No.
No.
Okay.
I'd like to get more information also.
I guess I'm not not understanding the direction. Am I getting direction from the majority of the council to bring this item back?
Yes.
Yes.
I'd like to bring it back with more information. I'd like to see what Yountville's doing. I'd like to see what PG&E's plans are with respect to future switching from 4,000 to 3,000 if appropriate. Will they roll out 3,000 since it's more appropriate for neighborhoods? What does it cost? 3,000 versus 4,000? Can you replace bulbs? And if so, what does that cost? I think that would be good information to have, and then we can make a more informed decision.
There is not adequate time to do that research before the next council meeting because of the prep time required and the posting of the agenda. And then we don't have a meeting till the end of the 29th of November. And so I think basically by making this decision tonight, you've missed this cycle. We can bring it back to you in spring.
We can't do a special meeting just for this item?
If that's what the majority of the council directs us to do, we can certainly do that.
Let's ask PG&E for some time.
What would be the deadline
For what?
for PG&E, to let PG&E know?
I heard the end of the month.
Yeah, I think we've already. This is the deadline for PG&E. Basically, I mean, anything else we're trying to. We're past the deadline they gave us as staff, and we asked for a few extra weeks, and they're trying to be flexible with us. So, I mean, I appreciate what the city manager is saying, and the only thing I would add is that the next time we come back, we want to do it and we want to make sure they can be here, because I think some of these questions staff probably is not adequately versed in the issues to be able to answer, and I think they need to be the ones to answer to. The fact is, it's their lights and it's their program, and so they should be here, and they weren't able to attend tonight, and so we won't bring it back again until they're able to attend.
So we could get this on the 29th, though, you're saying?
It would be very well. We'd have to talk to PG&E. Because of the tight timeline. That's exactly right. They weren't available. We did ask them to come. Keep in mind, this is their program, and so you're asking us a lot of questions that we're not able to answer because it's not our program. So we can ask them for the 29th, but none of the research will be done on our part. So basically, you'd have the same staff report and would then be able to ask the questions to PG&E because there's inadequate time for the list of questions you just went through. There's not adequate time for us to do that research, finish the staff report, and get it on the agenda and be able to answer your questions adequately from a staff perspective.
Yeah, I think the issue here is that PG&E has put a really short fuse on this decision, and it could have significant impacts. And so, they probably should have given us more time, but we are where we are, and I think we should nicely ask them to give us more time. And if we can get the research done and figure out the options, so we've got the information and aren't making a decision without having all the facts, I think that would be great.
But again, the research, it's not our program. And so are you asking us to dedicate staff time, putting aside another city project that's our responsibility to investigate and research a project that's not our project, that we're not responsible for? Is that what the majority of the council is asking?
I think what I'm asking is sort of 5 questions that we send to PG&E and let's get responses from them.
Okay.
Or see if they can come on the 29th.
I think that's what I'm looking for. It's really PG&E's programs. We'd like to get PG&E here to respond to those questions.
If they'll come, that'd be great.
So if they could come on the 29th, they would probably be able to answer these questions.
On the 25th of October or the 29th of November?
I'm sorry. Could we do it the 25th of October?
If they're available, we'll certainly ask. But I'm just letting you know that the staff report's going to look pretty much the same, and that then your questions would be directed at the program managers who are PG&E.
Right.
Yeah. If we get the right answers and we feel comfortable, then we could opt in potentially at that point.
I just want to clarify, because you said again to do the research to come back to answer the questions, and I just want to be really clear that on the 25th, we won't have done the research to be able to answer your questions. We're going to bring PG&E. So I just want to make sure expectations are...
Yeah, they are the research, right? They're going to...
Okay, I just want to be sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if it's worth our time to at least call Calistoga and make inroads there to see how far along they are, and Yountville. I think that's not a PG&E issue. That's a regional leverage issue, and we need to show force there. We can do it. If we can't, if that train has already left and there's no way, then that's another story. But I think that's important information for we have a missed opportunity, in my view, of regional government where we can look at this and all 3 of the cities come together and go, look, we want those 3,000 kelvins, and you got to do it, or you're going to have a problem.
Well, let me just add one thing here, which is that I think this should be on our agenda on the 25th, whether or not PG&E can come, assuming that we're not too late and can no longer opt into its program. So, but again, I don't see any new staff report here.
So you want to just, I won't have any more, if I put this, so you're directing me to put this on the October 25th agenda, even if we have no additional information for the council?
Well, the one additional piece of information you'll have is whether we are out of time with PG&E, or if we're not out of time, whether if we make a decision to opt in on that date, that's the last possible date, which is what and it may be beyond the last possible date. That would be about the only thing that would be before us there. But to give the council one more chance, if PG&E is not available, to opt in.
Well, if they're not available, maybe we can send them sort of the 5 questions and see if we can get responses from them. If we can, then that could also help us make the decision that day.
Okay, but that's writing the staff report. That's what I'm just trying to balance your expectations, because I'm saying, are there things, we have city business to do, and I understand this is city business, but then those questions have to be asked, they have to be analyzed by staff, because then we're here and you're going to look at those questions and you're going to have questions for us. So I'm just trying to understand what your expectations are. So I'm hearing that I'm going to put this back on the agenda for the 25th. Regardless of whether PG&E can make it or not, regardless of whether they answer our questions or not, with the intent of having the council discuss it again, but potentially staff will have no additional information except whether we've met the deadline or not.
Right.
But would it be possible to find out what Yountville's status is by then?
Certainly, I heard that Calistoga approved it.
Yeah, and they actually went beyond the program PG&E is offering and said, we want to place our city-owned lights as well with these 4,000 Kelvin lights.
Maybe they were misinformed, and maybe we need to educate them. That's the point I'm
they've already taken action opt-in, so that's all I can say is they've taken action opt-in.
Boy, it's there's a little bit of defeatism going on here. Let's at least try to communicate with these two entities.
I am happy to talk to both city managers. Neither one reached out to me, and I did not reach out to them. So I'm happy to do that. You just asked us what happened in Yountville and Calistoga, and we're telling you that Calistoga made the decision to adopt this program and go beyond the program. There's no defeatism. That's the facts. But I'm more than happy to talk to both city managers.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Maybe the city council members should go to Santa Rosa or Napa and see what they look like.
I'm going to.
And make your own judgment.
Again, I'm not worried about the aesthetics and what they look like. It's about the health effects at the end of the day, just to be clear.
All right. So, next item on the agenda is item 10.3, to provide staff direction regarding the Multicultural Committee. And let's see, Ms. Black?
This item is brought before you to determine the status of the committee. As I've reported previously, we have recruitment issues. We only have 3 members. We have a hard time with quorums and being productive. And so this item is before you tonight to direct staff on how you'd like to proceed.
All right. Any initial comment before I open the public hearing? Nope. Let me open the public hearing. Would you like to speak?
So you've given me ample opportunity to revise. Good evening. My name is Janice Gay, and I'm the chair of the Multicultural Committee. I live here in St. Helena since 1972. 2001, I retired after teaching 30 years at RLS. Point being is I've seen all the reiterations of our community. I'd like to begin by thanking committee members Patty Wiehosa and Milagros Castro for their hard work in presenting the September 16th Mexican Independence Day celebration. Patty Milagros, as well as volunteers Gui Tapia and Adela Ramirez, presented a memorial evening. Of course, the event would not have happened without the support of City Hall and the council. I was unable to attend, but like I told Patty, I could tell by her photos on Facebook, everyone looked like they were having fun. The Multicultural Committee was formed in 2005 by Monsignor Brinkle and local citizens concerned about the plight of Latinos in our community. Now is not the time to go into the details, but the important information is today's St. Helena is better able to address these issues. such as affordable housing, law enforcement relationships, and opportunities for citizenship and voter registration. Our remarkable family center has absorbed many of these needs, and our clinical A is a poster institution for providing health services to the Latino community and those less fortunate. Second and third generation Latino St. Helenans are now successful citizens in administrative, medical, and legal fields, as well as icons in the wine industry, to name a few areas. We have several Latino teachers in our schools that were former St. Helena students. Lately, and some might say finally, MCC now understands how much our community is dependent on the past for its definition and how we need to review and evaluate our present, can't read my writing, in terms of our relationship to the council, but to the community as well. MCC was once a robust committee that worked with the city to serve citizens' needs and protect their rights. MCC did such a good job that now we find ourselves in need of major self-assessment in order to flourish again and bring Latino community participation to city government. Facilitating our renewal will require lots of reaching out to other groups, as well as dialogue amongst ourselves and anyone interested in contributing ideas. A survey is a strong possibility. Through working independently and free of transparencies required by the Brown Act, we will have more opportunities to reach out to other community groups and agencies beyond St. Helena that may help us in our process. We understand the council will probably tonight decide to untether us. We understand, and our plan is to reinvent ourselves and come back to the council with a formal plan that will benefit us all. On behalf of Patty, Milagros, and myself, and those that went before in the past 11 years, thank you for your support.
Thank you very much. Is there any further public comment? Let me close the public comment. I certainly have gone to many MCC meetings over the years, and I think what the chair of the committee said is fundamentally correct, and that is that it had real goals that related to the city and worked on those issues for years. But today, with time, those issues to a significant extent have been resolved in terms of the committee vis-a-vis the city and the city council. And so she's recommending, as I understand it, that the committee be untethered from the city, meaning that if a group of individuals wishes to proceed as a voluntary association that's outside the role of the city, that's absolutely fine and certainly to be encouraged by me. But at the same time, it's also, I think, pretty clear from what she said that the committee itself is not functional in terms of being a city committee at this point. So my suggestion would be that we undertake at this point to disband the committee and free up the city resources, which is required to support any committee. That's also in the back of my mind.
Are we sure that that was the recommendation from the chair of the committee to disband, or that she was expecting that we might disband?
No, she said that the work of the committee would be untethered from the city. That was the word she used.
Well, no, I thought she said that she was expecting that that was what was going to happen.
I don't feel like she was recommending that.
All right. Well,
I don't know.
Let me back off a little bit.
Were you recommending?
Yes.
Please.
We'll let you come back.
I think it would be good for everybody.
Can you, in the mic? In the mic.
I have the voice of a teacher, though.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think the only way we can revive our group, is to, there's so many wonderful things that are going on that we need to get outside of St. Helena even and work with other agencies and other groups, see what other people are doing. And I don't think we can do that as a committee of the St. Helena Council. So I'm asking that. Yeah, I think I'm asking that we are untethered so we have a chance. I mean, I don't like doing it. It's got a huge tradition and so forth, but hopefully the passion the three of us feel now we'll be able to move with it.
Right, okay, good. I thought I interpreted you correctly.
Yeah.
So very good. Thanks very much.
Can I ask one question while you're up? Why do you feel as though we haven't been able to fill these positions? And is there something that hasn't been done in the effort to fill them?
Well, again, I think a survey will help us, but what little I've been the few people I've talked to in the Latino community kind of feel that it's sort of old school and that there's a lot going on that I know Milagros, though, feels very strongly she'd like to work with education in nutrition and so forth. I know Patty wants to continue with the 16th celebration. Personally, I'd like us to get more in touch with what's happening now in the Latino community, and I wish there were more participating in the political arena of St. Helena. So that's the question we have, is if we can be part of the group that gets it moving, hopefully we come back under the auspices of council. But if it turns out we don't. But I really believe in coalition building, so maybe we won't, but we'll see.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So,
Does this take a motion?
yes.
One
We're
quick
providing
question.
direction, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Is there a possibility to put the committee into sort of hibernation mode versus disbanding?
Like suspend?
Yeah. Because what I hear is some hope that the committee and its function and goals and objectives gets relooked at, reworked, reinvented, so to speak. And I don't want to send the wrong signal that we're disbanding it and untethering it, but is there a way to allow some time for that to happen and essentially put it into this hibernation mode or suspension while that is done?
One of the things that I heard is the Brown Act is inhibiting some of the things that they want to do or how they want to act. And whether you suspend it or whatever, it would still be a council committee that would be under those terms, under the same regulations that we are. So, that's kind of what I see, but I could see they could reinvent themselves and then come back to the city council and say we would like to, be a committee of the council.
I just want,
And
I want
what's
our,
it take? Another resolution.
yeah.
So,
In other words, we'll welcome you back.
I must say that based upon what I heard, I think the appropriate action is to disband the committee this evening, and then if they do come back with a plan, we're always all ears to see whether it's something that we should support down the road. But it has to be a real plan, and they can't seem to reach that goal if they're tethered to the city and the Brown Act is applying. That's the kind of the issue as I see it, just as the Vice Mayor expressed it. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to, I wish there was some word other than disband, but it seems like that's the right word.
untethered.
My question wasn't answered. My question wasn't answered about whether or not, if we can't go into a suspension or a hibernation, I get it, but can we with a committee? Can they be put on hold? And the reason I say this is I want to send a strong signal to our Latino and Hispanic community that we are our doors are open, and if there's I don't know if it's the Brown Act or not, but whatever it is, the doors are open. And I also, before we finalize, I'd like to say that even if we do that, I think we still need to be very supportive of celebrating Independence Day and making sure that that tradition doesn't stop.
Spotlight's on.
What I was noodling with the city manager about there was that The agenda item before you this evening doesn't allow you to actually disband. It's calling for you to give direction to staff one way or another. And if the direction would be to untether or disband or whatever, we would come back to you with, I believe it's going to be a resolution that would take whatever actions would be necessary to accomplish what the council direction would be. And one thing that I would suggest you could consider along the lines of what you're articulating would be that there would be something contained in that resolution or whatever whatever we bring back to you that would provide for that would provide to the community some recognition that the council is open to the resurrection of this committee at some point. I don't know if that's what you had in mind, or whether that's
or better yet, supportive.
Supportive. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the suspension. We suspended you suspended work for the committee for 2 or 3 months, 3 months, 4 months, I think it was. So you could certainly do that. It just needs to be very clear then that they're no longer. That's the thing is with the Brown Act is they truly aren't a committee of the council and therefore are free to talk among themselves and work and hold meetings and things like that. So as long as the suspension was worded very carefully and it was very clear to the committee that you're not a committee of the city and the council, so that then they can do their work, we would work on that language. But I think that's certainly an option for the council.
Well, I must say that sounds like reasonable direction.
Let me just add a few comments. I went back to the original bylaws, the resolution that started this committee. Well, it wasn't the original, but it was an updated one and the mayor was mayor. And I think it's important for us to go back and try to figure out, well, what did we do back then and what was the purpose? Because I think it's relevant to how we go forward. It says the Multicultural Committee's purpose is to encourage and facilitate Hispanic involvement in community and city issues, provide a bridge between the Hispanic and non-Hispanic communities, and a forum to discuss issues of concern or interest, create regular contact and exchange of ideas between the Hispanic community and the city of St. Helena, help bring the Hispanic community into the public and political process, city government and administration, plus community programs, services, and affairs. Work together to create a sense of unity between Hispanic and non-Hispanic communities and address potential areas of conflict or concern before they escalate, and strengthen the community as a whole by also strengthening the Hispanic community's living environment and civic involvement. So the point I raise is that's on us as a council. That's what we determined would be the scope of the Multicultural Committee. And I don't want it to imply or even to suggest that somehow this committee is deficient or they didn't do their job. I think it's our commitment, and maybe this is not the vehicle to reach these goals. Maybe there will be another vehicle that we can explore down the road. But I think these goals are very worthy to this day, and we need to focus on the goals and then figure out what is the best vehicle to achieve these goals. These are important goals. And so I just wanted to make that statement. I'm in support of the mayor's direction, but I wanted to make sure that it's not a matter of, well, they failed or there were deficiencies, or it really is our responsibility to figure out how we want to interact with the Hispanic community and how we want to bring the Hispanic community into local government.
Those are great points, and maybe an additional part of the direction is that we need to bring that back as a council topic of discussion at some point in the future, not next meeting or after we've all had time to think about it and really opine on this with respect to what's changed that has caused the committee structure to not work anymore, and really think about what's the better vehicle and how do we push that agenda forward as a council.
Well, I think at the moment we have the direction that you need in terms of bringing back a resolution. And probably we've done all we can tonight with respect to that. So that then takes us to the next item, maybe the last item.
It is.
Ms. Mitz.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night. Report to the City Council on sales tax trends.
Save the best for last, right? So thank you very much.
As you recall, on August 23rd, the City Council did ask for additional sales tax information and trends to be brought before the City Council. So this is informational purposes. So I'll run through the slides hopefully fairly quickly. Sorry. We're having technical difficulties. Perfect, thank you. So as you can see from the first slide, out of everything in our general fund revenues, our general fund revenue projections for 2016-17 are approximately $10.8 million. Out of the $10.8 million, 27% of that does come from sales tax revenue. So that's what our projections are. The slide that's on the screen should look familiar. It is inside our adopted budget. And this will show you the sales tax revenues that City of St. Helena has received. And this is from fiscal year 2013 on up through the estimates of 15-16, because we still do not have our audited financials, and what we are expecting for 16-17. So you can see the City of St. Helena has had an upward trend in our sales tax revenues. As stated in several of our budget workshops, it does look like the 16-17 is slightly lower. However, that's due to the infamous ending of the triple flip, which was in 15-16. So I'm sure I'm going to be so glad when I don't have to say that anymore. So you can see.
Can we make you explain it once again?
I know. I have dreams about it. Yeah, it's just tattooed right here. So you can see our sales tax revenue has been increasing pretty steadily over the past couple of years for the City of St. Helena. The City of St. Helena does contract with Muni Services to provide us quarterly updates on our sales tax revenues, as well as provide us with an annual projections for what they believe our forecasting is going to be for our revenues. I wanted to explain a little bit about the categories that Muni Services does provide to us. They do provide us a lot of information. Most of the information is confidential information, but what they do is they provide it into one category and then two different segments, and the full list of category and segments were provided as an attachment to the agenda report. So the first is the broadest of the categories, and that is the business category. There are 6 different business categories, so they go general retail, food products, transportation, construction, business to business, and miscellaneous. And these are categories that are given to us by the state, and that's my understanding from what Muni Services has conveyed to us. Underneath a subset, or basically a subsection of the business category, is in the economic segments. So I'm just providing an example of it without doing the comprehensive list on the screen. So for the business category under food products, the economic segments underneath that would be restaurants, food markets, liquor stores, and then food processing equipment. And then it is important to notice, and I'll make a notation a little later on, food processing equipment, under the confidential data, which unfortunately you're not able to see, but if we look at the food processing equipment, every single business listed underneath there are wineries. So I don't know why it's categorized as food processing equipment. Muni Services has explained that that's what how the category is done by the state. However, when you do see food processing equipment, it is 100% wineries in that segment. The next subset of the economic segment is the business segment. So again, taking the food products business category, if you look at the economic segment of restaurants, under restaurants, it's fast food restaurants, restaurants with beer and wine, and you can see down the list. So all of those are subsets of that restaurant business or economic segment. Everything that is listed in the attachment to the City Council report, just because it's listed on there does not mean that the city necessarily has it. So I just wanted to make everybody aware. Those are just larger subsets that are provided to us or that the state regulates. So in the broadest of all the categories for our business category trends, I took everything from this, and these are in calendar years because that's how Muni Services reports it to us. So I took the 5-year business category trends. So out of the approximately $2.8 million that we collect in sales tax every year, at least that's the projections for this year, you'll see the economic trend is that 51% does come from food products. Approximately 19 to 20% is from construction. Approximately 15% is from general retail. Transportation's right around 10%, and then business to business and miscellaneous, those are the top two bars, and they're about 2% each. So you, transportation, if you would have to go back to the end of the report, and I can go through the list of what. Part of it is gas stations, part of it would be retail, part of it would be car sales, part of it would be car repair.
Wow, okay. Well, can I ask a question while you're on this? You don't
Yes.
have to flip back later.
Perfect.
Construction's gone up, right? We know our sales tax has gone up like, what, 200,000 or maybe a little bit more. And so is the decrease in general retail as a percent of the whole because construction has grown?
Yes.
Or did it actually decrease whole dollar amount?
It would be, because this is a 100% value, so it would be if one category increased, another one would have to decrease just by
so
percentage.
retail hasn't gone down. It's a little, one might
Yeah.
think, oh, we're losing retail, but that's not the case.
Yeah. And I think the next slide might help in that. What I did is I equated this to what what this actually means in terms of dollars. So what I did is I took the percentage, the average percentage that we've collected. So in the screen before, you can see the category trends, the percentage.
Yep.
So if I take that 51% for the food products, in terms of dollars, based on the 16-17 adopted budget, food products of our $2.8 million for sales tax, food products bring in a little over $1.4 million. So that's the biggest of the categories that we have. Construction is right below 600,000. General retail is at 400,000. Transportation is about 250, and then business to business and miscellaneous, that 2% is right around $85,000 range. So that's how that actually equates in dollars. And we can do that if you take the first slide where it says how much in revenues we've taken in for the years, and you do those same formulas, you'll be able to get the actual dollar amounts and provided by each category. Does that make sense?
If you had the percentages, which we do for the previous
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, so if you look at the previous year percentages.
Got it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to be able to equate this into dollars for what our 16-17, so what our current budget is looking like for what our projections are. And so if you look at the sub-segment of the business category, what I did is I just took the top 5. So in the economic segment, which is a smaller, a more narrow focus from the business category, you can see at restaurants bring in about 25%, food processing equipment 18%, and those are, again, wineries. Building materials retail is at 12%. Food markets is at 7%, and then building materials wholesale is at 8%. I have had some recent conversations with Muni Services just to get the differentiation between building materials retail and building materials wholesale. And what I got back from Muni Services today was buildings material retail. I'm going into your establishment, I'm buying stuff for fencing. That's what is considered the retail. The wholesale side is if a contractor is going in there and purchasing it for other purposes. So those were the differentiations between those two categories. And then for the economic segment trends, to equate that into dollars, taking the same 16-17, and I apologize, it says top 5, and I only put 4 on there, so that was my mistake. So you'll see out of the economic category, restaurants we're anticipating about $700,000 for this fiscal year. Food processing equipment, again, wineries, a little over $500,000. Building materials retail was about $400,000. And then building materials wholesale and food markets were right around the same, about $200,000. So you can see how those can translate into that. And also seeing out of $2.8 million, I believe my quick sum of this was about 1.9. So about $1.9 million out of our sales tax revenues per year are brought in by these top 5 economic segment categories. I did do some comparatives, the 5-year trend between our neighboring cities, so American Canyon, Yountville, and Calistoga. Unfortunately, due to just staff timing as well as what information is confidential, and then one of the other factors into this is different cities use different reporting mechanisms. So for instance, ourselves and Yountville both use Muni Services, so they are going to look a little bit the same. Calistoga uses HDL, and they report things slightly different. And American Canyon, I was unable to confirm which organization they use. But you can see the 5-year trend for all of the cities is that there has been a slight increase in sales tax collected collectively for the different cities. One thing that I was able to find out is for Yountville, they have an average of 92% of their sales tax is received from restaurants.
Restaurants, yeah.
Yeah, it was restaurants. And then Calistoga, 33% of it was, I made myself some notes. 33% was restaurants and hotels for sales tax. And then the next flip between business and industry and fuel and storage sales over the years. And that was pretty much the most detailed information I can find out, and it's mostly related to things are reported differently, so without being able to go into the detailed confidential information, there's no way for myself and the staff here to decipher that. If we look at the sales tax percentage increase year over year, again, as seen in the charts, the slide before this, every city has experienced an increase from year to year. So I wanted to at least give the city council some comparisons so they can see between 2012 and 2013, St. Helena's sales tax increased by 10%, between 13 and 14 increased by 9%, then by 4%, and then 5%. So you can see the different cities across the board. Again, this doesn't mean that there's a decrease from one year to the next. It's just a steady increase. And again, because of limited information, some of the anomalies, like with Calistoga going from 15 to 16, have a 23% increase. We have no way of really digging in and knowing what that is. So the final slide for the sales tax trends, it is receive and file, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Did you have any, you mentioned that in Calistoga, like 33% or so was restaurants and hotels, or some sales tax that's charged at the hotels. Did you have that for the previous year? Was there a big jump in that category?
That category is consistently right around the 30 to 33% range. She gave me 4 years worth of information.
Yeah,
so
I'm just curious at that 23%. What are they doing that has caused that jump, and can we do it too, right?
And that one's hard because it did shift between whether it was service stations, whether it was business to business, and unfortunately we're not privy to some of that information. So what I received from Calistoga was their pie charts just saying what percentage, and this is their non-confidential information that's given to them by HDL.
Cool. Where would tasting rooms fit, under what category?
That would be the food. For us, it's food processing equipment, so that's under wineries.
Would it not be the same for everyone else?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
For Yountville, it's going to be reported the exact same way that ours is. Mm-hmm. However, for Calistoga, HDL reports a little differently.
Right,
so
you said that. Okay.
All right. Are there any other initial questions before I open the public hearing? Does anybody want to comment at public hearing?
Pam Simpson, St. Helena Chamber of Commerce. Thank you to the staff for doing this, and we appreciate it. I have to say, thank goodness for our wineries. There's a lot of, talk about how the wineries don't contribute to the city of St. Helena, how their revenues go outside, and I think tonight is a good example of how our wineries actually do contribute back to the city, and to the tune of $1.4 million, 52% of your sales tax comes from wineries. I think that's important to note and repeat and say a couple of times, so I will. And then restaurants too. I think that's really huge that the restaurants are producing that kind of revenue for us. I think that the sales trend shows that the economy's been good, and I would imagine that it's going to stay strong for the next year or two. We all know that there's going to be at some point a correction in the market. When that is and exactly which year, we don't know. But I think that we can count on the sales tax going up, but maybe at a slower rate. I think that it shows we've been doing really well. Also want to just point out how important Central Valley is to St. Helena. I think it's obvious that the construction, wholesale, and retail is obviously Central Valley. I know that's all confidential, but I think the reality is we know who it is. And so I think I just want to point out how important they are to our community and how important they are to this town. So that was my takeaways from all of this. And just thank you for your continued support, and I'm glad you did this so you can see how well the businesses are doing and how much they do contribute back into the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any
Thank
other
you.
public comment?
Thank you.
So I'll close the public comment. Is there any further council discussion at this point? It is a terrific report. And I must say what stunned me perhaps the most was the difference in sales tax collected by us as opposed to Yountville and Calistoga. And also seeing that American Canyon's really not very far from us. But American Canyon has a far greater population base too. But a terrific presentation.
So, with this presentation sort of, prepared and put together, is this something that can be easily updated periodically so we can keep our finger on the pulse in terms of our sales tax and where things are moving?
Yeah, as far as the information for St. Helena, yes, it is. I built in charts and graphs and formulas for that purpose if the council so wished.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Then I will declare the meeting adjourned. Thanks so much, everybody. There's no closer.
Who was pitching? And then Casilla probably sealed it. Oh, that's too bad. Well, when I looked at our break, they were ahead 5-2.
Yeah, the All-Star game needs to be banned.
Yeah.
Oh, is that who won the?
That's when they started calling down.
You want a drink? Yeah. Yeah. Let me just make sure that let me see if I have to sign any documents. Maybe I can do it tomorrow. Yeah. Absolutely perfect. I'll be there at over the library at 10 for the workshop. I can come over after the work. Yeah, I'll give you a chance. Sure.
They get it off the top line, so gross income, they get 4%. And they develop, own, operate with their own money, their own equity, just like sand, you know, and it's a more true model that used to exist before it got broken into parts and pieces. Yeah. Why that happens, so the brands could expand more quickly, globally. Yeah. It's hard to do when you're asset heavy. It's an asset light model. Yeah. So it's interesting. I didn't even realize that they didn't build their own places until I started. They'll tell you how to build them. Yeah, well, of course. They'll tell you everything that you don't know that you should know. Yeah. And they actually don't know. Yeah, exactly. And the people that are on the development teams, they never built shit. Yeah. They probably can't use a ruler. Yeah. But they can sure tell you what their standards books say. Yeah. But getting just going through the RP process and getting to know these guys is interesting. I get it. I like the whole development. It's like everyone's behind themselves. Everybody's vested.
Are you actually going